All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and kick off today's events. And of course, it would not be a Republican event without the presentation of colors. If I could have everyone's attention, please rise, remove your hats, all that good stuff as we bring out our presentation of colors team.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets let glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a beautiful rendition of the national anthem by Celeste Delgado Pelton. Again, a big round of applause.
And salute. Ready, two. Have face. Forward, march.
And now I'd like to welcome the Weld County Republican Party Chairman, Tom Van Loan.
Greetings from Weld County, where we feed the world, where we fuel the world. May we pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing us safely together today for this important endeavor. Father, we thank you for all the blessings that you have bestowed upon us, being an American, being a Coloradan, being given the strength to lead and take on the constant struggle to preserve and protect our freedoms that you have blessed us and this great nation with. On this day, we humbly ask that you are with us and guide us with your wisdom and your vision, and be with all of us as we debate and listen and understand, Lord, how we shall proceed. Help us to grow closer as both Republicans and human beings so that we may honor you with our deeds. We ask that the participants are granted the patience and strength that they need to effectively communicate their positions. And Father, we ask that when we are done, we may all come together as one to serve you with honor. In your Son, Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
All right, everybody, settle in. It's time to do that. Whoa. I was going to say it's time to get this rumble started. I would, of course, never violate a trademark by using another popular phrase that has the word rumble in it. I'm Mandy Connell. I'm going to be your MC for the evening, but the real stars of the show are coming up to the stage right now. We have a U.S. Congressional District 8 Republican primary debate coming up next. I'd like to welcome Gabe Evans and Janak Joshi to the stage.
They have 90.
Oh, here.
For the opening. They each get 1 minute. Well, we'll say each time, but they each get 1 minute to introduce themselves. They each get 1 minute to introduce themselves. And then it'll be 90 seconds to answer the question. And yeah, we'll tell them each time. And 2 minutes for the question.
Okay. Now is my, oh, hey, here we go. I'd like to welcome our moderators for today's debates. They're very familiar faces to you guys if you pay attention to politics in Colorado. First of all, from the Colorado Sun, welcome moderator Jesse Paul. Oh, the moderators are over here. You're like, oh, you're going to sit over there. Okay. Like in the peanut gallery over here. Also, your friend and mine, political expert for 9 News, Kelly Maher. We also have political reporter for Colorado Politics, Ernest Luning. And Chris Rourke with Rourke Media, LLC. I'm going to let the moderators take over. I will be trying to help you guys keep time today to keep everybody on track. The moderators will give you the rules of the debate and get started.
All right, everybody. What we're going to do, we're going to have an hour-long debate between the candidates in the 8th CD here. And we did a coin toss. Gabe Evans, you get to give the opening remarks. We're asking, rather than traditional opening remarks, just introduce yourself for a minute or so. And I'll say at the outset here, we're going to use your names and not your titles throughout the debate, okay? You'll each get 1 minute to introduce yourself. Gabe?
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone who came out today. This really is a great day to get to know the candidates, get to shake hands, ask questions, and hopefully leave here a little bit more informed about where we all stand on the issues. I'm Gabe Evans, born and raised here in Colorado. I'm honored for a couple of reasons. I've got my mom here today, specifically highlighting her because I was homeschooled all 12 years. Also, today is my wife's birthday and my dad's birthday, so make sure you give them a round of applause too. This is exactly how they wanted to spend their birthday, I'm sure. Gabe Evans, born and raised in Colorado, 12 years U.S. Army, another 10 years in law enforcement, married with 2 boys. I'm a current Republican state representative, and now I'm running for Colorado's 8th Congressional District. If you'd like to learn more about me, I got flyers on the table, and you can visit my website, electgabeevans.com. Thanks so much for coming out today. God bless America.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Joshi, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody coming here today. My name is Janak Joshi, and I am a retired physician. I have practiced for 30 years, so I have a lot of healthcare experience. I was in the State House for 6 years, 3 terms, served on several committees, so a lot of legislative experience too. I am pro-life, pro-Second Amendment. I am an immigrant from India, and I have visited the borders, so I know a lot about immigration. I am for 3 main principles: smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulations. And my track record is there. You can go check me out. I do my walk and talk the same thing. So what I say, that's how I follow. And you can check my track record, and you will see that I always got the cut rate of 100%. Never voted for a tax. Thank you.
Good afternoon, candidates. Mr. Joshi, you just referred to yourself as a retired physician, and yet you surrendered your medical license in 2008. Yet you've continued to present yourself as a doctor on the campaign trail, in campaign ads, and in campaign materials. Are you misleading voters?
Thank you. I was waiting for this because you guys have done this all along. It was a frivolous lawsuit that a hospital had filed against me. And I was going to fight it and I would have won that. But at the advice of my attorney, who said that it would cost me over $100,000, and he says, if you can retire, you can keep the money and do whatever you want to do with that. So that's the advice I took, and I did it. It's a very similar situation that's going on with President Trump. The government has unlimited amount of taxpayer money. They will harass the citizens like you can't wait. And that's what they were trying to do that. It was a Republican Attorney General too. So these are the kind of people we got in the government. If you elect me to the Congress, I'm going to fight this government. This government needs to be controlled. They are harassing the citizens.
Mr. Evans, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you. So I fully want to understand here. What was the incident that resulted in this lawsuit being brought? What was the specific facts? You all know I was a cop for 10 years. We focus on the facts, the details, the evidence. What was the specific allegations that ultimately brought about this lawsuit?
I'm glad you asked me. This was Penrose Hospital. I'm going to take my gloves off now and name the names. I am a nephrologist. I had a case which I was taking care of, and this hospital said I needed a consultant. And so I said, no, I am the consultant. I can take care of this patient. And they would not let me do that, so I discharged the patient, took it to another hospital, continued to take care of the patient. As a matter of fact, the board has said that I had provided proper treatment of that patient. Then the board wanted me to take some extra training. I said, I'm not going to do it. So the issue with the license had nothing to do with the patient care. I refused to follow the board's requirement because there was no need for it. And that is why they came after me. It had nothing to do with the care at that point.
I have a quick follow-up here. Are you misrepresenting yourself, though, to voters when you're appearing in a physician's coat with a stethoscope?
No, because I still have my MD degree. I'm still a doctor.
But you're not a practicing doctor.
Right. I'm not practicing, but I'm still a doctor. That's the end of the story.
All right, thanks. We'll move on. Now, for Mr. Evans, you attended the Republican Women of Weld's debate in January. Good to see you again. You were asked whether you believe the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Donald Trump, and you said no-ish. You also answered no-ish and yes-ish to a couple other questions there. Now, what's the ish? Have you decided one way or the other? Was the election stolen from Donald Trump?
So I answered ish there because to me those aren't yes-no questions. Like I said, I was a police officer for 10 years, so I look at the facts, I look at where the evidence leads. For the 2020 election, look at the Hunter Biden laptop story in October. That's when that broke. And if you went on social media, you went on Facebook, you went on a lot of the big tech sites, what you would see is that would be flagged as fake news, false news, fact-checked, and that was all squelched and suppressed until after the election. And then after the election is when then you start to see some of these media outlets, some of these tech companies, Facebook, et cetera, saying, oh, oops, yeah, we got it wrong. Maybe Hunter Biden and the laptop actually did exist. That information being kept away from the voters prior to the election was an act of interference in that election. So I stand for freedom of speech and being able to actually give folks the information that they need to make a decision before the election and not have that covered up.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Joshi, you have 30 seconds. What are your thoughts on?
Well, every election has some irregularities, but I'm focused on the current election. I'm going to continue to win this race. And this is the election that we have to focus on. So I'm not going to waste my time on anything else right now. Yes, there are irregularities.
Candidates, the next question is regarding immigration. Donald Trump proposes staging mass deportations using local police, the National Guard, and potentially the military to round up undocumented residents. Do you support this policy, and how do you think this will impact the local communities and the 8th District's economy, including agriculture? You each get 90 seconds to answer. Mr. Janak, please go first.
Thank you. We first have to secure the border, that's for sure, 100%. And then as soon as we do that, we probably need to deport all these people who came in irregularly. They jumped the borders, they jumped the lines, and then we have to figure out a way how we are going to deal with them. We should always process all our immigrants outside the country, not inside the country. That way we can do all the background checks. Just like I came to this country, I had to go to the consulate office. I had to have my blood test done. I had to get a chest x-ray done. And I had to bring all that to the airport where the immigration officer checked it out. The laws are still here. We are just not following the laws. And a lot of these people who came here, they don't need asylum. Many of them have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to the smugglers to smuggle them in the country. So we know that. We need to stop all this illegal activity and follow the laws. We can give the work permits to people who need it. Wherever there are agriculture needs or construction needs, let's give them the work permit. These people want to go back to their home, spend their money with their families, and they want to come back again. So we should have work permit program to allow all these people. And we can do that. The laws have been followed in the past. The Congress does not have guts to do this right now. They are cowards.
But do you support rounding up those who are undocumented? Do you support rounding up those who are undocumented?
We have to deport them all.
Mr. Evans, 90 seconds.
So, of the three things that you listed, police, National Guard, and U.S. Army, military, I've done all of those things. But more than that, the story of my family is the story of immigrants. My grandfather, my abuelito, he was born in Mexico. He immigrated to this country, and he earned his citizenship along with 2 Purple Hearts fighting in World War II. He earned his citizenship the right way. And so as a police officer, as a military veteran, I know that the first thing that we have to do is secure the border. Until the border is secured, do not pass go, do not collect $200. We need to reinstitute things like remain in Mexico. We need to build more border wall. We need to empower our local law enforcement officers to be able to follow the laws that we have in place right now. The problem is the leftists that are in control of our country and our state are doing things to handcuff the hands of law enforcement. In Colorado, they've actually prohibited law enforcement from even being able to interact with their federal counterparts. If I pull somebody, or when I was a police officer, if I pull somebody over that I suspect is not only illegally in the country, but is illegally in the country committing crimes. After we secure the border, then yes, you need to go, you need to wait in line, you need to do it the right way, and we need to focus on getting the criminals and the cartels that are causing problems in our society out of our society after the border. And even now, that is where we need to start making sure that these folks are not allowed in our society.
But not everyone's a criminal. So how do you distinguish between who you're going to round up and who you aren't?
So, again, as a police officer, we have a pretty good idea of who is in the country working, not causing problems, and who is in the country selling fentanyl, selling drugs, going to the Home Depots, stealing the DeWalt batteries. These are all things that I've personally worked with. The problem is we know who the folks that are in our country illegally are, and because of leftist defund the police policies and because of leftist open border and sanctuary city and state policies, law enforcement at all levels cannot go out and do their job, arrest those individuals, hold them accountable, and ultimately either put them where they belong, which is behind bars if they're causing violent problems in our community, or send them out of the country. We know who they are.
Next, before we move on, but that's not President Trump's proposed policy. He says deport them all. Mr. Joshi says deport them all. Do you support that? And what effect would that have on the economy in the 8th CD if you began doing that in January?
Yeah, so the 8th Congressional District is a major agricultural producing district. But we have to make sure that we're drawing a distinction between the folks that are here illegally and the folks that do it the right way, that are here on visas, the folks that have a lawful permission to be able to work in the United States. It's a critical part of the economy. So for those folks that do it the right way, we need to make sure that we're streamlining that process so that the farmers in my district are able to go out and have the manpower to be able to work their fields with folks who are lawfully here. If you are not lawfully here, you need to go back, you need to wait in line, and we need to make sure that we are distinguishing between those folks who are in our community causing crimes, causing violence, distributing fentanyl, distributing drugs. Those are the people that we need to identify and remove first. But yeah, you go back and you wait in line the way everybody else does in a law-abiding society.
Okay, well, Mr. Joshi, would you object if President Trump sent National Guard troops from another state into Colorado to execute deportations?
No, I would not object. Just like I said before, the illegals have to go out. The legals, we never have a problem with legal people like me who came through the proper channels. We are not talking about deporting them. We are talking about in the last few years. We have seen, now nobody knows the real number, but people say anywhere from 10 to 20 million people. Look at what happened to Denver. Denver has spent over $200 million supporting this, and they are still sending a list of demands to the mayor because they want more freebies. I am talking about, and I think President Trump is talking about, people who are getting freebies. We do not want to give freebies. We want people to come here, work here, and make this country great again.
Okay. Gabe Evans, would you object if President Trump sent National Guard troops from a red state into Colorado to conduct these deportations? That's something he said that he'd consider doing.
The first thing that we have to do is we have to acknowledge that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and when you have states like Colorado that go rogue and do what I just talked about, which is say that our local law enforcement cannot work with the existing federal entities that we have, Immigration and Customs, Border Patrol, lots of other different entities, that's the first problem. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that all of the states in the United States are actually following the law. They are not out declaring themselves to be sanctuary cities and states, that they are required to work in conjunction with the existing federal resources that are there for this exact purpose. Once those resources are all tapped out, then that's the point where you can move on to stage 2 and have the second part of that conversation and say, how do we protect the territorial integrity of the United States from what is quite literally an invasion on the southern border? And so yes, if the civilian authorities can't do that, then there's absolutely a fallback plan to be able to do it, but we need to go after the sanctuary city and state policies that are handcuffing our law enforcement at all levels, that have the resources and that exist for the express purpose of doing that. That's what they're there for. That is also the fiscally responsible thing to do, because I know that National Guard mobilizations also cost a lot of money.
Okay, but yes or no, would you object if President Trump sent National Guard troops from another state into Colorado?
Two-step plan. Use the existing resources that we have, and then after that, then you can look at what else is necessary to protect the territorial integrity of the United States, to include National Guard.
Okay, so no, you'd be okay with doing that at some point?
Yeah, two-step.
All right.
And I would say I won't be wishy-washy like that. I will support President Trump.
Okay, thanks. We're going to go on to another question, and let's say we'll do these for a little while here until we get to our lightning round. Well, you'll each get 90 seconds, and if you mention your opponent, you'll get 30 seconds to respond at the end of the question. Now, Chris has a question here.
Okay, we're going to move on to abortion policy. Abortion policy will be a major topic in this election. First, will you vote for a national abortion ban if one is brought before the House? You have 30 seconds each. Mr. Joshi.
Thank you. I am in favor of national policy, so I would favor that. And I'll tell you why. Because if we start to have fractionated policy in different states, we will have real chaotic policy. I will give you an example in India. In India, as many of you know, they were doing like aborting the females, And there was a national policy now, though everything has stopped. And only medical emergencies are now followed.
Mr. Evans?
So the pro-life movement has been working for the last 50 years to have Roe overturned at the Supreme Court. That happened. I think that case is very clear. I think that case sent the issue back to the states. And like President Trump said in April of this year, I think that this issue now firmly rests at the state level for the states to be able to figure out how best to protect all life, born and unborn.
So you believe it should be handled in the states or with a federal ban?
State level.
Thank you. Just a quick, would you vote for a federal ban if it were brought before Congress?
If it were brought before Congress?
Would you vote up or down on that?
I mean, I'm a man of my word. I've said I think that this is something that belongs at the state level, and so, like President Trump, I can't get behind a federal ban.
So whether it's the federal, state level, where do you draw the line? Would you allow abortion up to a certain number of weeks of gestation? If so, how many? Mr. Evans.
So I'm pro-life. My wife and I have had 2 kids, high-risk pregnancies, mostly her. We've had 8 miscarriages. So I've seen the heartbeat on the ultrasound machine. And then you do the follow-up appointment, and then no more heartbeat. So I know that abortion stops a beating heart. And as a police officer, I know that we have situations, tragic situations, rape, incest, life of the mother, things of those nature. So I support those exceptions being in pro-life pieces of legislation like H.R. 7, no taxpayer funding for abortion.
Mr. Joshi.
Thank you. I went to a school where we were taught how to save lives. I strived all my life how to save lives. I got up in the middle of the dinner, middle of the night, got up, went to the hospital to save a life. I'm 100% pro-life.
So that means you would not allow for any gestational period for abortion?
Not at this point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go on to the lightning round. This will be easy yes, no questions, and or very brief answers. Keep them under 1 sentence if we can, okay? And we'll start with Mr. Joshi. Name 2 committees you would ask to join if you're elected to Congress.
Health committee and probably something to do with the financing.
Finance. And Mr. Evans?
Energy and commerce and agriculture.
All right. And Mr. Joshi, again, we'll start with you for the first half of these. When you get up in the morning, what are the first 2 news outlets that you check?
I read a lot. I've been reading a lot of newspapers since I could even stand on a table close to this table like this. So I usually read about 4 different languages newspapers. I probably read about 15 or 18 newspapers every single morning. I've done it since I was a little kid.
What are the first 2? Give me 2 ones that our audience will be familiar with.
I would probably go with the Fox News and BBC.
Okay.
So I get different ideas.
Great, thank you. Mr. Evans, which 2 news outlets do you check first thing in the morning?
I check a lot. First 2, more often than not, is probably Fox News and Colorado Politics.
All right. Thanks. And again, Mr. Evans, do you support the deferred action for childhood arrivals or the DACA policy?
Can you repeat that?
Do you support the DACA policy? That's the policy that allows children who were brought here as children and have grown up here illegally to remain in the United States under certain conditions, and if they meet certain conditions. Do you support that?
Yeah, I would support that because they were kind of brought without their permission. But again, we have to still look at how many were, if any of them are criminals, and all the background check is very, very important before we do that.
I think that's part of the policy, is that they have to meet certain
I would
conditions.
do background check first before we do it.
You do support that. Okay, Mr. Evans, do you support DACA?
Yeah, secure the border first, and then after that we can figure out what to do. But yeah, if you came here as a 1-year-old, this is the only country that you know, we have to be humane.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Joshi, Donald Trump is the first president to be convicted of a felony in U.S. history. Will you still vote for him?
Yes, I would, because I think it's the same like my personal story. This was a frivolous lawsuit.
Okay, Mr. Evans.
Yes.
All right. And if you had, again, Mr. Joshi, if you had the chance to advise Donald Trump, who would you tell him to pick for vice president?
There are so many good people, so I don't have one person in mind, and some of them I don't even know personally, so it would be hard for me to tell him.
Do you have two favorites?
Not really.
Okay, Mr. Joshi, or Mr. Evans, I'm sorry.
You know, I've spent exactly maybe a minute and a half thinking about that. I don't have a well-formed thought for that.
Okay, thanks. And Chris, we'll go on. And why don't we have Mr. Evans start for these?
We have more. Who would you vote for, or who did you vote for in Colorado's presidential primary, Mr. Evans?
For president? Yeah, Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, I had already endorsed him before primary too.
Okay. If Republicans have the majority, who is your pick for speaker next year, Mr. Joshi?
I don't know, and we don't know who will be elected, so I'm going to not comment on that right now.
Mike Johnson?
No.
Mr. Evans?
I think Mike Johnson's doing a great job with a 2-vote majority.
Do you support the Colorado GOP's efforts to opt out of the state's open primary system? Mr. Evans?
Tell me how you're going to win independence.
Mr. Joshi?
We need to drop out of the open primaries. That's not how our system was designed.
The Colorado Republican Party recently called on parents to pull their kids from public school. Do you agree, Mr. Joshi?
If the school system is broken, parents know better than the government.
Mr. Evans?
I think parents have the right to select the education that works for their kids, and then the right to be able to see what their kids are being taught so that they get a good education and not a political agenda thrown at them. You guys know my story. My kids are homeschooled, charter schooled, and public schooled. I'm a firm believer in educational choice.
Do you support the federal government moving to reschedule marijuana, Mr. Joshi?
Yeah, there is no problem with that right now because we need people to decide. I'm more for education. I'd rather educate the people and let them make up their mind.
Mr. Evans?
So I hate the term marijuana because as a cop for 10 years, I know there's a lot of different compounds in marijuana. I don't like THC. There's a lot of other things in marijuana that need to be studied. They can't be studied as a Schedule I substance. So I have a strong stance against THC being available to minors, but we got to study the rest of it.
If elected, do you pledge to limit yourself to 3 terms in the House in line with the U.S. term limits pledge? Mr. Evans?
So the U.S. term limits pledge says that you will support the, an amendment to limit to 3 terms. But the left doesn't do that. If we flip this seat, the 8th Congressional District is a national battleground seat. I'm going to hold this seat.
And Ernest? Oh, sorry, Mr. Joshi.
I'm all for term limits.
Agree. All right. Before we move on, because we always hear this after the lightning rounds, is that they're not easy yes/no questions. You each did elaborate a little bit, but starting with Mr. Evans, 30 seconds to talk about what your answers were and Mr. Joshi's, if you have any further thoughts.
I'm pragmatic. As a police officer, when folks would call me up, they would say, I have a problem. My first question wasn't, are you Republican, are you Democrat, are you Libertarian? It's how do we solve the problem? So I know what my principles are. I know where I stand on things. That's why I was homeschooled all 12 years. That's why I've selected that option predominantly to school my kids. So nobody wants another spineless politician. I know what my principles are. I know those things I will never compromise, but like I did as a police officer, I can talk to anybody. That's how I try to legislate. I hope my answers reflected that.
All right, Mr. Joshi, 30 seconds. Just.
No, I think the main thing is on the term limits, and I'm all for term limits. This is not a job. This is a service, and I'm here to serve my people. Then when my service is done, I go home.
So CD8 is a tough district. In fact, it's the only House district in Colorado that's rated as a toss-up, and it's a swing district. How do you win in such a tough district? 90 seconds each. Okay. Actually, explain why you would be the better Republican candidate than your opponent. Mr. Evans, go first, please.
I've lived and worked in this district really since I came off of active duty in the Army. As a police officer, I worked for the city of Arvada. That's Jefferson and Adams County. So I've been a cop in Adams County for 10 years. My kids have gone to charter schools in Adams County. I've gone to church in Adams County. I do my shopping in Adams County. I live in Weld County. I raise cattle in Weld County, and I'm a current concealed carry firearms instructor in the little part of Larimer County that's also in this district. My professional career, my social life, my jobs span this district from north to south, from east to west. And not only that, I currently represent a huge part of this district via my state house seat. I represent Adams and Weld County. So I already have built-in networks of support. I already know the issues. As a police officer, I stood in people's homes and listened as they talked about the fact that we are now the third most violent state in the nation. We have the highest cost of living in Colorado. Colorado is the #2 state in the nation for teenagers overdosing as a result of drugs. I've fought down at the state capitol for the Common Sense Institute says up to $340 million that are being spent not on Americans, but on illegal immigrants. I know these issues. I've been fighting these issues. I live in this district. I work in this district. My kids go to school in this district. I can win those moderates that we need to be able to flip this seat and send a common sense conservative to Washington.
Mr. Joshi, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Every area you would look in, I have more experience than anybody in this race, whether it's general or in the primary. I have legislative experience, I have healthcare experience, I have business experience, I have immigration experience, and all my track records are there too. So any which way you cut, I will be ready to fight for my constituents and for our state. And this seat is very important, both to flip as well as to have the majority in the Congress. So we don't need somebody who is not experienced. We need somebody who can start from day one. And I will be that person. Also talking about foreign policy, I have traveled over 120 countries and territories. I have met prime ministers and presidents and foreign ministers. I know how to deal with this. So I will be ready from day one. As they say, it's like a fire hose. Well, for me, it won't be a fire hose. I will be ready from day one to fight for our people and do whatever hard decisions we will have to make. I will do it because I won't be afraid of anybody. This is not a job for me. I'll go serve there, so I don't have to worry about next election.
All right, thank you. We've got a couple individual questions for you that you'll each have a chance to respond to what your opponent says. Mr. Joshi, you signed the Colorado Libertarian Party's pledge to adhere to some certain policy positions the Libertarians laid out as a condition for not running a spoiler candidate in the general election. And I think a lot of folks agree, whether a Libertarian's on the ballot this fall or not, could make a big difference in a district as narrowly divided as the 8th CD. But I'll say, Mr. Joshi, in it you agreed to work to dismantle American intelligence agencies, something Mr. Evans earlier said he couldn't agree to because we live in a dangerous world and need those tools to protect Americans and the country's interests. Mr. Joshi, why is that a position you're endorsing? Give 90 seconds, then Mr. Evans, you'll have a chance to respond.
Thank you. Well, as we have seen lately, a lot of government departments, particularly at the federal levels, they have been abusing their power. And even the Intelligence Committee has been one of them. As you already know, I don't have to elaborate how Mr. Trump was treated during the election and how he was followed and so on and so forth. So we definitely need to get control of all these departments. We may have to reformulate them so that they serve us and not abuse us. As I said, my personal experience with Mr. Trump's experience with the Justice Department, look at what is going on. All these departments have been weaponized currently, and we need to take those weapons back from them so that we can serve the country and our country is protected and not they go after the citizens.
Okay, but you'd be in favor of dismantling national security intelligence agencies like the CIA, the NSA? Would you be?
Anything you want to really bring it back in the better way, you have to first dismantle. So you have to do that, and then there will be a lot of good people. They can reapply. What happens to a lot of these companies who go for bankruptcy and other things? They say everybody has to reapply. So that's how you do it. I mean, it's like running a private business. You say, you all are gone first, now let us have a new organization, and now you reapply, and we only take back those people who are good.
All right. Sounds like the libertarians are fans. Gabe Evans, what are your thoughts on that? You've worked abroad. You've worked in agencies that try to protect the United States. What Mr. Joshi is saying makes sense?
So we were actually just talking about this. Everybody that posted the flags earlier was a veteran. So thank you very much to all of the veterans in the room, all of the law enforcement, first responders that raised your right hand and said that you're willing to put your life on the line to protect your country. What we were talking about there specifically is those of us that are in the military, the reason that a lot of us are very, very conservative is because we've worked for the government, which means that quite often we don't fully trust the government. That is why we are advocates for small government. That is why we want to rein in deficit spending and ensure that we have accountability. But you can't abolish the intelligence agencies, and that is what the pledge says. I have the greatest respect for the small government beliefs of my libertarian friends over here, but we cannot abolish the intelligence agencies, especially when we have a wide open southern border over which we have dozens, if not hundreds, of known terrorists and terrorist sympathizers that are coming into this country, particularly at a time where we have a president who has projected weakness all across the globe, and so you have leading sponsors of terrorism like Iran who are creating problems internationally. This is not, you can't abolish the intelligence agency. You can't just fire everybody and restart. This is an art. This is something that there are millions of years of human beings experience, and we need to, do we need to rein it in? Absolutely. You cannot abolish the intelligence agencies.
Okay, thank you. And we've got a follow-up. Thanks, folks. Another follow-up from Mr. Evans on the Libertarians' pledge also called to reduce funding for federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, the IRS, the ATF. Is that a position you support? Would you have signed on? Do you agree with that? And is it a responsible position for your opponent to take? I mean, are you agreeing to defund the police, in effect?
Well, it's a position that my far-left Democrat opponent, the current Congresswoman, has taken, because she has not only voted for all of the open borders things, sanctuary city and state policies, but she has gone out of her way to sign on to letters that call for Joe Biden to defund immigration and customs, defund Border Patrol, and guess what? Those are federal law enforcement agencies. Those are the federal law enforcement agencies that are tasked with securing our southern border. So no, we don't need to be defunding ICE. We don't need to be defunding Customs and Border Patrol. I was a police officer for 10 years, and so I saw the crime and the violence that international criminal organizations and cartels are bringing to our state, that are bringing to our community because of the wide open southern border. Do we need accountability? Absolutely. We always need accountability. But this is not the time to be defunding law enforcement. This is not the time to be signing on to letters, as my far-left Democrat opponent has, that call for immigration and customs and Border Patrol to be defunded. We need accountability, and we need to ensure that we are putting Americans first, and putting Americans first means properly and adequately equipping those people who are guarding and defending our borders, who are also federal law enforcement agencies and agents.
Thanks. What about some of the other three-letter agencies, though? What about the FBI, the IRS, the ATF, ones that work domestically? Would you want to reduce funding for those?
Well, we definitely don't need 87,000 new IRS agents, so those guys can go.
Okay.
the FBI, the DOJ, we've seen what they've done. The left has weaponized those systems. So I've said it repeatedly. We need accountability. Accountability starts with retiring Joe Biden and his leftist rubber stamps in Congress who are enabling the Department of Justice, the FBI, and those other entities to be able to go out and effectively weaponize our criminal justice system by picking winners and losers rather than the blind justice that I swore to uphold and defend, the Sixth Amendment right to an impartial trial.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Joshi, you agreed to reduce funding for federal law enforcement agencies.
Well, as I already said.
Why is that? Please respond to what Mr. Evans
Well,
said.
as I said, I mean, a lot of these departments have been completely out of control. They are actually, instead of defending and protecting the citizens, they are doing everything else. So we need to definitely get rid of them, reorganize, and then we can decide what funding they really need. And we can do the proper funding. This is the area of funding which will help us to control the budget. This is how we are going to bring our deficit under control. So a lot of these issues, as I said, first we have to just get rid of them and then restart. And there are a lot of good people there that we will rehire them, they will reapply. So we definitely need to defund them and then start all over again. And that's how my policy would be, and I would support that kind of policy. But we have to get the federal budget under control. We have to cut the budget, and we have to work on this if we are going to give our grandkids the American dream that I came here to achieve, and we have to do that.
The next question is regarding the Affordable Care Act. Do you support Donald Trump's call to terminate the Affordable Care Act if Republicans win congressional majorities? And if so, do you replace them with anything? What would that be? 90 seconds each, and Mr. Joshi, go first, please.
We have to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. It's neither affordable, and we cannot continue with that. It was very bad. When I was in the House, that's when it came. And we were always against it. We tried to vote it out in Colorado. Unfortunately, the Republicans at that time voted to bring it in Colorado. And we were, I believe, about 12 of us who voted no on, and our Republican colleagues voted to bring it in. So I have been against it. I have traveled on many countries in Europe, just studying their healthcare system, Netherlands, Germany, Spain, Soviet Union, England. None of them were working. They all were telling us that why are you going our way? As a matter of fact, I wrote an article in Gazette after I came back and called it Eurocare. And that's what we ended up with. And right now, all my friends, all my colleagues are telling me patients are not happy, doctors are not happy. So we need to get rid of Affordable Care Act, what we call as Obamacare. There will be a two-tier system. You can go and listen to my talk on Jeff and Bill show. I described in detail how I would do it. And actually, I think Billy was the one who said, you are the fourth one only who has come up with a very specific healthcare plan. So I would recommend everybody to go on that talk show and listen to it.
Can you briefly tell us those two tiers?
Yeah, there will be a basic healthcare, and there will be something that if we want extra, we have to pay for it. In Netherlands, when I was there back in the 90s, they were already doing it. It will take a little bit longer to describe it, so I don't know if you will give me that time.
Who pays for the basic health care?
The government.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, so, I mean, I started off the story earlier. We've had 2 high-risk pregnancies, 2 boys, and we've had to do a ton of medical work, of follow-up with specialists, tens of thousands of dollars, even with insurance that my wife and I have had to pay out of pocket, even with the coverage, to be able to ensure that our kids are getting the health care that they need because some of the complications that they have. So I know how critically important it is to make sure that Americans and Coloradans have access to affordable health care. The problem is, the left loves to name a bill something and then have the actual results of that bill do the exact opposite. What we need to do, we can see it here in Colorado. The leftists in Colorado have run 4 healthcare insurance companies out of the state of Colorado in the last 2 years because the red tape and the costs make it too expensive to do business in Colorado. So what we need to do is we need to cut the red tape. We need to put doctors and patients back in control of their health care. We need to cut out the middlemen. There are so many ways that you can streamline the system and make it much more affordable by putting patients and doctors in control of their health care. Unfortunately, what the left does, what Obama did, added more red tape. It added more hurdles for folks to be able to do. I support putting doctors and patients back in control of their health care without all of the ACA-imposed red tape.
Give me one idea that you have to bring doctors and patients together that would solve this issue.
Yeah, so there's this thing called gold carding. Gold carding basically says if you are a doctor and you have proved that you can make good decisions, the amount of pre-authorizations that you have to apply for dramatically goes down. It's something very similar to what we did when I was a commander in military aviation. We identify those human beings, because at the end of the world, human beings is what makes the world go round. You identify those human beings who can make good decisions reliably, and you empower those people to make good decisions with less and less red tape. There's existing programs all around the country. It's called the Gold Card program. That's just one way you can cut out all of the middlemen, put doctors, good doctors, and patients back in charge of their care.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Republicans have held a very narrow majority in the House this session, and it's gotten smaller as some members have resigned, like former Congressman Ken Buck. But the caucus has also been very divided. Well, I ask you both, would you have voted to oust Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Mr. Joshi?
At this point, I don't know all the inside baseball, so I would not comment because you have to be there, what was going on, and that's what you have to do. So.
Okay, and Mr. Evans, would you have voted to remove Speaker McCarthy at that time?
I think Ben Franklin said it best: hang together or hang separately.
All
Yes
right,
or no, though?
No,
I think
again,
he's-
without
he's
knowing the
saying-
insider baseball, probably not.
Okay,
We got to
and
hang together.
after he was removed, though, there were, 4 Speaker nominees and, before we got Mike Johnson as Speaker. Mr. Evans, would you have voted for Jim Jordan as Speaker when he was the nominee?
Probably not.
Okay, Mr. Joshi?
Again, I do not know all of them, what their thought process was and what they really stand for it. But I would say one thing, I would vote for a speaker who would help us to bring the budget deficit down, and get the regulation down, get the government under control. These are the Republican principles, and somebody who follows them, I would vote for that person.
Okay, can I ask Mr. Joshi, would you ask to join the Freedom Caucus if you win a seat in Congress?
Yeah, a lot of my philosophy is like the Freedom Caucus. I stand for freedom and liberty. So anything that brings freedom and liberty to American people, and if, as a congressman, that's my job, I would join that caucus.
Okay, Mr. Evans, would you join the House Freedom Caucus?
No.
No? Okay. Let me give you each 30 seconds to talk about kind of how Republicans can work better to pass legislation. This has been also, as well as a narrowly divided Congress, it's also been the least productive House in living memory. Mr. Evans, 30 seconds. How would you work within that to actually produce results?
Same way I have as a current state legislator. Republicans in Colorado are in a historic super minority. Nevertheless, my first year as a state representative, I had a 75% pass rate for my legislation because of what I talked about in that law enforcement part. I'm focused on what are my principles that I will never compromise, but how can I collaborate with folks to be able to solve problems? My first year, we passed a bill that identified folks that SWAT schools. So they call in fake active shooter threats to the school. The school locks down, everybody gets in trouble. The Democrats said, no new crimes. We passed a law that said it is a felony to intentionally go out and SWAT a school.
Okay. Mr. Joshi.
I think what we need is educated, knowledgeable, elected officials. That's a very important thing, because then only they will all work together, because then particularly in both sides, if we are serving our country, There are certain principles, and that's what we have to follow. I would not be anybody's lapdog. I will go teach everybody what needs to be done, and then I will work together. But if I'm a good congressman and I have good ideas, people will come and work with me.
All right, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to take a little time for each of you to ask the other a question. We'd like you to keep your question brief, not a big speech, just ask a question, and then each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond. Mr. Joshi, please go first.
Thank you. I would ask Mr. Evans, in last month's Adams County Republican meeting, Mr. Bonnewell asked him that why are you being a stooge of American Prosperity when he said that I would take money from anybody who is anti-Biden. Well, American Prosperity raised $70 million to fight against Donald Trump. They are for also open border. How could they be anti-Biden? And why would you take money from somebody who is for Biden?
Ben Franklin said it best, hang together or hang separately. This goes back all the way to the founding of our country. We know that Joe Biden is the worst president that we've had in living memory. The guy can't even walk up the stairs without tripping and falling down. He's projected weakness all across the globe. He's presided over a massive open borders crisis. And we know that the Democrats, funded by their massive billionaire donors like George Soros, are pouring money into the coffers of my Democrat opponent. Winning an election, the way the Democrats do elections, they treat it like a business. They have more money than Republicans do, and that's how they win elections. And so I am willing, as I said before, I know what my principles are, that I will never compromise. You guys have heard me talk about how we need to secure the border. And so if Americans for Prosperity wants to help me unseat one of the most leftist members of Congress who has repeatedly called to defund immigration and customs and the Border Patrol, then you know what? Like Ben Franklin said at the founding of our country, I'm going to work as a big tent Republican with anyone who believes in those same broad principles that I do of American exceptionalism, securing the border, bringing the cost of living down, making sure that our kids get a good education. I can build that big tent coalition. That is how we win the 8th Congressional District.
All right, thank you. Mr. Evans, do you have a question for Mr. Joshi?
Yeah, so Mr. Joshi, I checked just yesterday, voterrecords.com, and I realize it may take a little bit for it to update, but voterrecords.com shows you still registered to vote in Colorado Springs, and as a state representative, you represented Colorado Springs. So how do you plan to represent a district that you've only very, very recently moved to?
So the voter record is definitely not up to date. I already have registered within the district back in first week of February. As a matter of fact, for the primary for president, I actually got a ballot from the Adams County. My address is already there, and I don't even get any more ballots in Colorado Springs.
All right. We've got one final question, and then we're going to move to closing remarks. It's been a good long debate here. Talk about cost of living. That's another major issue heading into the election here. We'll start with Mr. Joshi. What do you believe Congress can do specifically to combat inflation and make things more affordable for residents? You each have 90 seconds. Mr. Joshi?
Thank you. Well, as I said, the first and foremost, we need to get the budget balanced, or we have to cut the deficit, because that would help. Our dollar value will get better, and that should also help with the interest rates coming down. That will help all the small businesses. They can go out, they can go ahead and start more expansion of their business, and the Congress also can do is reduce the regulations. There are so many regulations. As I'm going around in the district talking to small businesses, many of them have asked, should we stay in the business? Because these regulations are killing us. Even at the local level, City of Thornton, City of North Glen, they say they are harassing them so much. So what the government can do, help the businesses and citizens, is to make their life simpler by reducing their regulatory burden and also reducing the taxes. Both of these helps every single person individually and the businesses. So the government can do this. And as a congressman, I would fight for that and bring it down so we can all achieve our American dream. That's the most important part that we have to do. And that's how government can help.
All right, thank you. Mr. Evans, what specific steps could you take as a freshman member of Congress to make things more affordable?
Yeah, so it goes back to the committees that we had talked about, Energy and Commerce and Agriculture. I've lived in this district for years. I've worked in this district. And so I know that this district has the 4th highest energy producing county in the nation in it. It has the 8th highest agricultural producing county in the nation in it. And then, that's Weld County, and then in Adams County is the backbone of Colorado. All 6 interstates in Colorado run through Adams County. And so what we have to do is we have to empower the homegrown economic powerhouse that is the 8th Congressional District. Cost of living goes up when fuel is more expensive, when food is more expensive. We all know basic supply and demand economics. We can produce the food and the fuel to drive America and Colorado forward right here in the 8th Congressional District. We can process it, we can transport it everywhere. And so that's why I want to serve on those committees, to re-empower our local economy, to be able to ensure that the red tape and the government restrictions that are crushing our farmers, our energy producers, our small business, we have the highest rate of restaurant inflation of anywhere in the nation right here in Colorado. We need to cut the red tape, we need to cut the regulations, we need to stop deficit spending money that we don't have, we need to re-embrace free market principles, the same free market principles that made America great. You do those things, you will bring down the cost of living and you will empower the workhorse that is the American economy and the American people.
All right, thank you. Speaking of deficit spending, which you both said, Mr. Joshi, would you vote to renew the Trump tax cuts?
What was the last word? I couldn't.
The Trump tax cuts. Those
absolutely.
are coming up for review next year.
I am for the tax cut. As I said, I mean, we have to cut the taxes. That's how we are going to cut the budget, and that's how we are going to get the deficit down. We have seen in the past, when the taxes were cut, the economy did better. So people have extra money in their pocket, which they will go spend or invest or do whatever, and that's what we have to do. We have to cut the taxes. Our taxes are too high.
Okay, Mr. Evans, would you support renewing the Trump tax cuts when
Yes.
that comes up next year?
Yeah, lower taxes, more money back in people's pockets.
Okay, and how does that affect the federal deficit?
Well, we have a spending problem first and foremost, so we have to prioritize how to spend less.
Okay, what are 2 programs you'd cut substantially to save some money?
87,000 IRS agents, and then I paid for my college overseas in a combat zone. Why are we having blue-collar Americans having to go do Biden's student loan repayment program? Cut that.
Okay, the Congressional Budget Office said that cutting those 87,000 IRS agents would actually bring in less taxes, that it's a net adds to the deficit. Is that still something you'd like to do?
I'm a fan of less taxes.
Okay, so we bring in fewer taxes because we have less enforcement.
Yeah, spending needs to go way down,
Okay,
and then the size of government just needs to shrink.
okay. Mr. Joshi, what are 2 specific programs that you would cut?
I'll just give you an example. There is a thing called earmarks. That was taken out, and then they put it back, which was passed in this last budget. Every congressman and every senator got extra money to spend in their district. And it was probably in a couple $2 billion worth. So the earmarks needs to go away again. And this is just one example. I have used another example. I mean, how the pork and the fat is in the government. You go look at the grant.gov and look at how many projects are being given grant money. And many of them are just completely useless research projects are out there. So like every other business, even in my own practice, there was always fat. I could always, if we had less revenue that month, I could always cut something. It's like in our personal life, we don't go to Starbucks for a month and you save quite a bit of money. So those are the kind of things are in the government, and we can just even cut couple percentage across the board, and I don't think anything will happen to the government. We'll just have a smaller budget if we do that.
You think a couple percent across the board, and that would include military spending?
We will have to look at a lot of these things. I'm sure, I mean, we have heard stories about $100 worth of screwdrivers and things like that. So
Okay.
there must be fat in the military too.
All right. We're at the time for closing remarks. Chris?
Mr. Joshi, you can go first with your closing remarks. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you everybody who came today to listen to us, and those who are watching us on the TV link. My name is Janak Joshi. I am a retired physician. I have practiced for 30 years, had my own small practice. My wife, who is sitting right there behind, we ran a mom and pop business. So I'm very familiar with a lot of you who are going through the small business and the difficulties you are having. I am an immigrant from India, so I have immigration experience. I have been to the border, so I know the problems at the border, how porous it is, what our staff is going through. My principles are very simple: smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulation. I think if we do that, this country will do very well. I am pro-life, Second Amendment, and I will fight for you if you elect me to the Congress, because I don't have any long-term plans like staying for another 20-some years over there. I will do my duty and I will come back. As an immigrant, this country adopted me, accepted me, so I owe you, and that's what I'm doing. I'm not running for fame or money. I'm running because I have to pay back my dues. And that's what I'm doing. So let's go. Let's win this election. Make this country great again. God bless America, and God bless all of you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Evans.
Well, again, thank you all so much for coming today. You've heard a little bit of my story, right? Born and raised here in Colorado. Served for 12 years in the U.S. Army and the Colorado Army National Guard. One combat deployment overseas, fighting fires, floods, search and rescues, all of the things that the National Guard does here in Colorado. Another 10 years in law enforcement. I've sworn 3 separate oaths, payable up to and including my life, to uphold and defend the Constitution, take care of my country, my state, and my local community. And I do that because I love my country. I love my state. I love the Constitution. I love the American dream that it has given all of us. And I want to be able to pass that on to my boys, like Ronald Reagan said, to future generations, because freedom isn't transmitted in the blood. That's why I took the 60% pay cut to step away from my job as a police officer and go down and fight at the state capitol. And that's why I am stepping out of my state capitol seat. House District 48 that I currently represent is a safe Republican seat. I would be a very, very popular incumbent to that seat. But I know that until we start winning some seats back in this country and in this state, the left is going to continue to have their way. And so when I say I'm all in, I'm literally all in to be able to go out, fight, and win, and flip this seat. In 2025, I don't get to be on the ballot again for my safe state house seat. In 2025, I will have either flipped this seat and have the honor and privilege of representing the 8th Congressional District in Congress, or I'll be doing something else with my life. That's not a move that a career politician makes. The motivation that drives me to do this is the same that drove me to serve in the military and law enforcement. Lower taxes and fees. Make Colorado a safe, affordable place to live again. Ensure that parents are in charge of their kids' education. These are the things that I stand for. These are the things that I've fought for. I'd be honored to earn your support. ElectGabeEvans.com. God bless America.
Well, thank you all. And can we get a big round of applause for both candidates? It's a... All right, well, thank you.
And coming out first, you know him from his work in the Colorado State House, Richard Holtorf.
Yay!
You know him for his work in the Colorado House. You know Representative Mike Lynch.
Hey!
You know her from her work on the radio and with her Parents Action Network, fighting for the rights of students, Deborah Flora. I don't need to introduce Jerry Sonnenberg. He's been around, and you know him. So there you go. And of course, Peter Yu, newer to the party, but also very well known to Republican voters. Our moderators for this event are Jesse Paul from the Colorado Sun and Kelly Maher, political news analyst from 9 News. I will now turn this over to, oh, Chris, you're in this one as well.
I am.
Chris Rourke, she got pulled back in. She tried to get out. I'll turn this over to our moderators.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Mandy. Richard Holtorf drew the best seat, so he gets to decide. He's going first in the intros, but we want to go through ground rules before we start. So we're going to do 1-minute intros, then we're going to go to the questions. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer a question. If someone mentions them or invokes them, someone else will have 30 seconds to respond. We're going to do a lightning round. We're going to do candidates asking each other's questions, and then we'll end with 2 minutes for closing statements. The candidates haven't seen the questions in advance, as Mandy kind of alluded to. We're responsible for the questions, and I think that's it. So, Richard Holtorf, and again, we won't name you by your honorariums. You all are just on the same level playing field, despite your elected positions. And so, Richard Holtorf, you have 1 minute to go first, and we'll go counterclockwise. So, Mike Lynch, Deborah Flora, Jerry Sonnenberg, and you're up.
All right, we ready to go? All right, well, thank you very much, Republican Women of Weld. Thank you for the Lincoln Club of Colorado. Most of you don't know I'm the only lifetime member of the Lincoln Club of Colorado in this delegate slate, because I believe that Abraham Lincoln was one of the greatest presidents in the United States and the founder of the Republican Party. I want you to know my name is Richard Holtorf. I've served for a long time in the military. I'm a retired colonel, War College graduate, 5 overseas tours and 2 combat tours. I'm a warrior. I'm a fighter. I'm tough. I'm pugnacious. And I'm not afraid to say what needs to be said and stand up for Colorado. I'm also a 3rd-generation rancher living in Akron, my hometown, and I've been running that business for 17 years. A multi-million-dollar diversified agricultural enterprise in our family. And I'm also a no-nonsense conservative. As the House Republican whip the last 5 years, I have passed over 38 pieces of legislation signed by the governor. Now, there's one lady that's not here, and I asked for a chair to be set here, and it's not, and I have to stop. But I'll talk more about that in a minute, because she allegedly lives in Weld County now. Thank you.
Hey, I'm sorry, Mr. Lynch. I'm going to cut in for a moment. Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Maher, and the question is, if you're having conversations in the back, if we could take that outside, because I know that people are seeing each other for the first time in a long time. There's a lot of people greeting each other. There's a lot of friends here. However, people are having a hard time hearing the candidates. So if you could take that outside, the doors are right on the east. Thank you.
Am I good? All right, thank you. Well, thank you, Women of Weld. Another successful event. This is awesome. Thank you to the Lincoln Club. This is awesome. It's great to be here. I got to tell you, it's a nice day. It's a tough day to be in a dark room, but I am Mike Lynch. I am a husband, father, veteran, small business owner, and a mere 4 years ago, I was just like any of you, sitting in that crowd and frustrated with what was going on in my government, and so I did something about it, and I got active, got involved, and ran for office, and most recently, I'm House District 65's representative. I represent Weld County. I represent Larimer County. And through that process, over the last 4 years, I've risen to the highest ranks in the State House as the minority leader. Through that period of time, I've figured out how to work in the most woke, progressive, agenda-laden House in the state, and I've been successful. I've got 47 bills that have been signed by the governor. Another 3, I think, will be done here in the next couple weeks, but it's an honor to be with you here today.
I'm Deborah Flora. As I talk with voters all over CD4, they want real results to our open border, our crippling debt, our rising inflation. They understand the serious problems facing our nation, and they want serious solutions. They want a serious representative that will be principled and fight for those solutions, not self. I understand the urgency of the issues that we are facing, and that's why I've been fighting alongside my neighbors in CD4 for years. As a parent and school choice advocate, radio host, and director of public policy for over 12 years. You see, I have stood from the school board to the State House. Now I'm ready to stand for all of you in Congress because I understand that is where the battle is. Not in front of a media circus, but on the House of the floor doing the real work. You see, I'm running to fight for your future and the future of our children and our grandchildren. You deserve a conservative fighter that you can be proud of. That's why I'm asking for your vote. Thank you, and God bless you.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Jerry Sonnenberg. Let me get this up a little more so you can hear it a little better. I'm Jerry Sonnenberg. Thank you for being here and those that are watching online to become more educated on their candidates. I'm a fourth-generation farmer and rancher up in northeastern Colorado where I've taken care of that farm and ranch. I would like to say for over 100 years. It's been in our family over 100 years. I haven't been there that long. But I continue to live in the house that both my father and I were raised in. I raised my children there. I have deep roots in this district. I served as the representative and as a state senator in the state legislature from this district. When I was in the legislature, I was President pro tem the last time Republicans could stop a liberal agenda. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to serve you in Congress. I have a record of getting things done, record of solving problems, and a record of experience and leadership. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Yu, and I kind of want to tell you an experience and a story that kind of sums up my entire campaign. So I spend every day out in public meeting every constituent I can. And the other day, I was standing in front of Ace Hardware, and a gentleman talked to me about 10 minutes, and he goes, Pete, got me a little bit of a tailspin right now because you're so genuine and you really know what you're talking about. I had already decided who I was going to vote for, but now I know what to do. I go, that's fine. Can you tell me why you're going to vote for that other person? And to summarize, it was basically, he loved the policies and the stances. And I said to him, you know what? I got those exact same stances and policies. I just do it without the drama. And he stood there, a little dumbfounded, felt like 2 minutes, but it was more like 5 seconds. Turns around, he shakes my hand. You got my vote. And that's who I am. I've been doing this through hard work, earning each vote one day at a time, one person at a time, and that's who I am as your next representative. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, candidates. Appreciate it. So again, you'll have 90 seconds to answer as we head into our long-form question round. First question is, Lauren Boebert is the one Republican 4th District primary candidate not participating in this debate. She declined to participate. Boebert is largely seen as the front-runner in the contest and was endorsed by the Colorado GOP and Donald Trump. So what sets you apart from her, and how do you plan to beat her on June 25th? Again, you'll have 90 seconds, and we'll start with Mr. Lynch and move to Ms. Flora, Mr. Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Jesse. It's good to see you. Wow, where do we start with that? What sets me apart from Lauren Boebert? My goodness. One, I've actually passed legislation. Though she's got a bill through, then she then turns around and votes to not fund it. I mean, so we're hearing a whole bunch of rhetoric that really doesn't ever talk about results. You know, this race and this time is important enough that we need to have people that know how to get stuff done, have actually passed bills. I would never abandon my district. That separates us pretty boldly. You know, as I've gone through this race, I have been completely honest with the crowd every time. So it was a tough crowd whenever you've got a room full of Republicans and they ask, do you believe in closing the primary? And I got to say no, there's some caveats behind that. But I raised my hand. Are you going through the assembly? I said no. I was honest about it the entire time. So honesty and integrity, your word is your bond in this business. I have figured that out, and that definitely separates me from Lauren Boebert.
All right, Ms. Flora, 90 seconds.
Yes. Well, I think there are several things. First of all, it really is time for us to rebuild our party and to stop the dysfunction and drama that is happening in Washington, D.C. We are down to a one-vote majority in the only body in D.C. that we control because of what is going on there. So number one, I'm a Reagan Republican. I believe in treating our fellow representatives with great respect, to build a conservative coalition so we can get something done. In addition, this district, by the way, is now 73% suburban, 49% unaffiliated. This district needs someone that reflects them and will reach out to our neighbors and treat them like what they are, not our enemy. Someone for us to persuade. That is what I will be doing, and that is the pathway to victory as I go out there and talk to so many people. I will point out one major policy difference, however. I am an unequivocal champion for Israel. Lauren Boebert has voted against funding for Israel, not just once, but twice since October 7th, which was one of the most barbaric attacks that we have seen. I will never back down on supporting our most key ally. I will stand for them because I have seen the unedited Hamas body cam footage. We can never let that barbarism go unchecked, and we need to stand with our key ally. I will always do that. I'll be a person of my word, and I will make sure that the world is a safer place by standing with those who are standing for us in this fight. Most of all, I want to grow the movement of freedom, not get our party down to even smaller than the 24% it already is. That's something that separates us.
Well, I can tell you that not only what separates me from Congresswoman Boebert, but what separates me from the rest of the candidates is experience and leadership. An experience and leadership that's done with integrity and character. Integrity and character in my neck of the woods is vital. Where we do deals with handshakes, where I build coalitions, where I have conversations to solve problems. I served in both the majority and the minority when I was in the legislature, and I was able to build coalitions and get things done. I was vice chair of the State Affairs Committee, where we killed liberal agenda bills, where we worked to stop what they were doing. I was chair of the Ag and Natural Resources Committee. I have that experience when it comes to water, when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to the things in oil and gas that are important to us in the Eastern Plains. I will tell you that when it comes right down to it, you need someone in Congress that won't embarrass you. Someone that'll do the work, get things done, and solve problems. I have that proven track record, and I will take that proven track record and work for you in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Mr. Yu?
Was the question how to beat Lauren Boebert, or what's the difference between me and Lauren Boebert?
The question was both.
Well, when it comes to that question, I mean, I think Lauren Boebert's being herself. Like I said, I've spoken to over 35,000 people here in the last 5 months, and I can count on one hand how many people are actually supporting her throughout the district. So I feel like who she is who she is. But in regards to what the difference is between me and her is, you know what? I have a full connection to this district. I believe that, you know what, hard work matters. And I think people realize that's who I am. That's why I'm out there 8 hours a day knocking on 500 doors. And I grew up in a life where I was working 60-hour work weeks when I was 12 years old. I worked more than I went to school. That's a fact. And I feel so blessed because that hard work pulled me and my family out of poverty. We have 7 children, all successful. And I've been very blessed. I've been able to work at the highest levels of corporate America, being able to have the biggest responsibilities of $1 million budgets, giant projects where I had to basically control 5 or 6 different states at a time, hiring thousands of people, and being able to get a project done and be able to get a revenue. That's actually called getting something done, and if you don't get it done, you're actually fired. And I think that's the difference. What we need in Congress right now is people who actually are required to do something, not just show up.
Thank you. Mr. Holtorf?
All right, Women of Weld, CD4, those that are watching, let's talk about why you need a fighter. But you need more than a fighter in Washington, D.C. You need a warrior, because we're in a battle for the Republic. I think a retired colonel should lead that charge. You ought to think about that too. But let's talk about my work and my record, Jerry. Let's talk about the fact that I've passed over 40 bills, resolutions, and tributes in the last 5 years in the State House, serving on the House Ag Committee, serving on the Public Health Committee. Let's talk about that we've been in a minority and super minority, and somehow I get bipartisan support and I get those bills across the finish line. I want to talk about the difference. Boebert voted against water projects in Colorado, in Washington, D.C., in Colorado. How do you do that if you want to represent this state? You can't. She doesn't know Eastern Colorado, and she was the wrong fit for this congressional district. I'm also not going to write a book when I go to Washington, D.C. I'm not going to do it. I don't need celebrity status. Ken Buck did that. And what happened to him when he said he was going to drain the swamp? He didn't drain anything. He became the swamp. So here's another one of those books. You don't want somebody that wants to go write a book. You want somebody that's going to serve you with honor, integrity, and selfless service like I did for 29 years in the United States Army. 5 overseas tours, 2 combat tours. I am your Huckleberry. You want somebody to support CD4? I'm the guy. And I need everybody to be convinced after today, so I'll do my best. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for saving me from having to read another book, because I'm the guy who has to read them all when you guys write the books. Mr. Lynch, we shortchanged you 30 seconds, so if you want to have another 30 seconds, we'll go ahead and give it to you.
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll move on then. You've all answered the question about what should happen to the people living in the U.S. illegally who are already here. But do you support Donald Trump's plan to federalize the National Guard or active military duty to deport people? What would you do should, what do you think should happen to people in the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals or DACA program? And we'll begin with you, Mrs. Flora.
Thank you.
You get, excuse me, just a minute. 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, last year I spent an extensive period down at the border going from El Paso, Texas to Deming, New Mexico to Columbus, New Mexico, listening. By the way, that's an important quality for whoever you hire for this job, listening to the people who really understand what's going on. We knew long before Christopher Wray finally woke up about the threat at our southern border that there were nearly 10 million people that have come across in the last 3 years. About 90% of them, according to Border Patrol, are single adult males of military age. They talked about people coming from Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Russia, and China. So when we talk about this situation, we need to understand who's really coming over here right now. My plan, which we did an extended version, I've written the roadmap to restoring America, and this week we released an extended version, which is restoring order at the border. We would start by building the wall. We've got to secure our border. Then we would defund sanctuary cities because it is luring people here. We would then work to make sure that Border Patrol can actually patrol, not just process. We've got to start there before we talk about anything else of who is here. But I've got to tell you, we have got to make sure that, like right here in Colorado, we end what is already happening. Colorado is a sanctuary state because in our state, after 2019, local and state law enforcement cannot coordinate with federal law enforcement. I would work to make sure that any policy where they have sanctuary false welcome mat luring desperate people here, they do not get a dime of federal funding until they allow federal law enforcement to do its job. That's where I would begin.
Okay, quick question. Federalize the National Guard, yes, no?
Well, what I would do is I'd start with the National Guard, as they're already doing in Texas. They are making sure that in El Paso, for instance, it's one of the safest areas. The Texas National Guard is already down there. This is a national security issue. We'd have to look at it a case-by-case basis, but we've got to start first with letting them do their job at the southern border. And by the way, that includes reclassifying drug cartels as narco-terrorist military organizations, which they are. That's where I would start by federalizing them.
Eliminate DACA, yes, no?
You know, that is a more complex issue going forward. It is not something that we should continue to have as an incentivized program where it is actually really a devastating policy for young children. We will have to start with the 10 million who came here first, and then we will begin to work out the process after that.
Mr. Sonnenberg, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I think I got the question, but I'll answer it the first time rather than do 3 minutes of, so
5
good
minutes.
job.
It's a complex issue that requires many
yes,
parts.
I absolutely would support using the National Guard. support the governor of Texas in his attempt to secure the border. We're in a war, in a crisis, with illegal immigrants crossing the border and coming into Colorado, let alone the United States. We have to secure that border. And in order to secure that border, we also have to make sure that when we secure that border, we also secure and stop those drug cartels and the highway of drugs, the interstate of drugs into Colorado. That comes from our southern border as well. So yes, the National Guard needs to be deployed. It needs to help us secure our country. That's our job. Let's secure our border, secure our country. Without borders, we have no country. Now, to the second part of the question regarding DACA. I would eliminate from here on DACA. Being born here makes you a citizen of if you're an illegal immigrant and you're born here. No, I would eliminate DACA. It would be virtually impossible, I think, to go back and do that 20, 30 years ago. So with that said, if you need more on DACA, I'm happy to do the same thing that my good dear friend Deb did.
Well, so DACA provides protections for people who were brought here illegally. They weren't necessarily born here. So should people who have protections from deportation under DACA, who weren't necessarily born here, but they were brought here and now live here illegally, should that continue, yes or no?
You're talking about people that are here working legally and have visas and those type of things?
They have protections under DACA. They can work under that.
Okay, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Yu.
So when you sit there and say the National Guard's the Colorado or nationwide?
Would you support federalizing the National Guard or active duty military to deport people?
Not in Colorado, not right now. No, I would let that handle being by our local law enforcement before we even consider that. Now, nationwide, you know what? That's a different story. Obviously, down at the border, that's a whole different story in regards to when they should be used, because that's obviously a whole different problem down there, what they have to deal with. But in regards to your other question, when it comes to DACA, this is obviously in the Dreamers. I think anyone who has a court date outside of 3 to 5 years, I think they should be excluded from the DACA Dreamer program. However, anyone else who's been here for 9, 10, 12 years, absolutely they should be included. There should be consideration, but there also has to be rules. Are they contributing members' site? Are they law-abiding? Are they basically, people who actually are part of our society who are Americans? This is the only life they know. So I fully support those who were brought here, not because they wanted to come here, because that's all they knew. And it's not always the easiest thing in the world yet. I'm sorry, you have a question.
How do you determine the cutoff point?
Well, so I was saying, if anyone, so obviously right now, anyone's coming across the border right now, they don't even have their court date for 7 to 8 years, 2031, 2032. That's already 7 to 8 years. So I think anyone that's been here within the last 5 years and their court date still isn't for another 3 years plus, I think that's where the cutoff is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Holtorf.
All right, thank you for that question, and I'm wholly and completely qualified to answer this. Maybe the only candidate before you. You see, I served in the Colorado Army National Guard from 1994 to 2001. I started as a captain, then I was a major, then I was a lieutenant colonel. What you don't know is I was the OIC when we had Operation Noble Eagle. That's when we stood up the largest federal agency, the TSA, across this nation after 9/11. I was there working with the FAA and a federal agency. Now, we absolutely, under the presidential order, can call up the National Guard, and if local state law enforcement, ICE, and Customs Border Patrol, and the president directs, the military should augment in a peacetime role, supporting the transition that needs to be done to clean up this mess. I'll also continue with this. I think that the expansion of H-2A needs to happen. I also don't believe that we should take all these DACA folks, most of them adults now, many of them were kids, and send them back to their home country. That would not be fair. There needs to be a process to vet and review every family member that's here and determine where they can go. Should they go home? Most arguably should, but there may be some that should stay. What about a doctor, a physicist? What about a nurse? What about somebody that's good, working, that wants to be an American citizen like my father, mi papá de España? He was naturalized, folks, and the thing he was most proud of was his U.S. citizenship. And that is important to me, and I'm very proud of him for that. Thank you.
Mr. Lynch.
Thank you. I'll go in order. So DACA, no. We've got so many folks right now that we have no documentation on. We've got so many issues to worry about before we worry about the folks that we already know something about. And so I would say if we do anything with DACA, it's got to be very smart, and it would be we stop that from this point going forward. But the folks that are already planning on that and counting on that in our country right now should not be messed with. Federalizing the National Guard. So that is a huge deal for the federal government to come into our state and take our citizens and tell them what to do in a mission. And so if we're federalizing, that takes the control away from our state and puts it in the federal level. We do not want to give the federal government any more control over our state than it already has. If we want to do that as a state, we can do that. We can send our National Guard. And just so you know, when I was in the 4th Infantry Division in Fort Carson, serving as an infantry officer, we oftentimes deployed folks to work on the border. So we're actually doing missions right now with federal troops that oversee that process. But for the federal government to come into my state and take our soldiers, our citizens, and federalize them is a very dangerous thing, and I don't believe that this particular crisis we have in the country right now calls for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're actually going to do a minute for this next question instead of 90 seconds, just for our timers too. Okay, so 1 minute, and Mr. Sonnenberg, you'll be first on this one. Donald Trump is proposing a 60% tariff on Chinese imports and a 10% baseline tariff on other imported goods from other companies. Do you support those?
No, I do not support tariffs either way. We need fair trade across the country. Being from the 4th Congressional District, if you understand that 80% of the wheat produced on the Eastern Plains is exported, if we tariff, they tariff, it drives up the cost of not only the products that we buy, but the products that other countries and makes us uncompetitive. I don't believe in tariffs from other countries unless it is, if they put a tariff on us, then we have to fight back in some aspect. I don't know if tariffs is the right answer there, but I'm for free and open trade and hate the use of tariffs as a weapon.
Thank you. Mr. Yu?
So obviously, we have a monster trade deficit between us and China. And so it does have to be addressed. The problem with the tariff, though, is who pays those tariffs? Us, the people, do here in America. So it actually is just a tax on us. It makes our cost of living go up. So in that regards, no, I don't support it in those aspects. But we obviously do need to make sure that we do reduce our trade deficit because things are not fair in regards to what happens between us and China or even other countries. So we do need to make sure that Donald Trump does take the opportunity to negotiate. I'd rather him negotiate this at the table as opposed to just trying to put a penalty out there.
Thank you. Mr. Holtorf?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I'm an America First candidate, and Donald Trump was a great president in his first term. Do you know that he had similar policies with raised tariffs on China in his first term? Do you know how many hundreds of billions of dollars this country took in using that type of a policy? We need to understand there is a huge trade imbalance, and China has been raking us over the coals and taking so much money out of this country. That's how they can afford to come back here and buy real estate and capital in this country. So let's get behind Donald Trump, number one. Now, could there be a tariff war? Perhaps. Would it hurt consumers? Perhaps. But we don't know that. Now, before this country, when it was founded, the federal government took all their money in from tariffs. They didn't even have an income tax in the birth of our country in the early years. So this is a very good tool to pay down the deficit, pay down the debt, and use it as a policy that balances and also protects the United States. And I'm an America First Donald Trump candidate, folks.
Thanks. Mr. Lynch?
Thank you. No, what we need to do is get back to the business of legislating, right? The reason we have to get products from China right now is because we have created laws in this country that make it hard and expensive for our free market to flourish. We can't just blame everything on other countries. The idea of a blanket approach of just wiping out China's ability to do business in this country is going to have widespread economic impact on our citizens. So there's a smart way to do this. I think, having that out there as a threat is great. I think the actual execution of it is not quite as pretty as the talking point of saying, hey, we're going to nail China and vilify them. What we need to do is figure out how we can make our country open to working in the free market better before we start blaming our issues on other countries.
Thank you. And just a quick yes or no on that. Do you support Trump's tariff plan? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Flora?
Thank you. Yes, we've got to look at this from many different angles. These are complex issues. Number one, I'm a free market advocate. I do believe that usually tariffs drive up the prices for hardworking citizens who are already struggling under inflation. And I do believe we need to free up our own economy. We need to get regulation out of the way so we can be competitive. We've got to unleash the juggernaut of America. We used to lead the world with innovation, with technology. Now, that being said, China is in a unique circumstance. I would make sure that, first of all, any trade does not involve sensitive technology. We need to understand that China sees things in dynasties, in 1,000-year periods. And I would say a bigger issue that I would look at is the fact I was talking to a farmer last week who was talking about how so much farmland is being bought up by China right now. Nothing would keep them from taking our own resources and shipping them elsewhere. We have to make sure that we are secure here first, that we do allow our economy to flourish, and we treat China in a very unique manner.
All right. Everyone on the stage has said that they will vote for Donald Trump in November. However, the question is there anything that former President Trump is facing on the horizon? For instance, any of the additional felony charges that he's facing right now that would make you change your mind? We'll start with you, Mr. Yu.
At this point in time, no. I don't believe that the charges against him right now are accurate or real. And until I actually see different, until I see real evidence, well, then we'll go from there.
All right. Mr. Holtorf, 1 minute.
Thank you for that question. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday I was on the Canadian Broadcasting System's TV talking about this very subject in Canada. They reached out to me, I'm not sure why, but we had a good 20-minute conversation about it. First of all, we don't live in a banana republic, but it's starting to feel like that. Second of all, why after 8 years in 2016, when the Stormy Daniels incident took place, why is it 8 years later that now New York State is bringing these charges against Trump? There's a problem here, Colorado and CD4, and this is a kangaroo court. Let's be honest, okay? All these cases are trumped up to keep Trump off the ballot. Well, if Trump's on the ballot, I'm voting for him, and I think every other red-blooded patriot American like me should vote for him too, because he can save this country, and I don't know if anybody else can. I got 10 minutes, and I'm going to use them right now. Here we go. 10 minutes. Give me 10, 9, 8, 7, 5. All right. I want to tell you, we got a problem in this country, and you better send a warrior to Washington to get this mess cleaned up, because I'm your huckleberry.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Holtorf.
Right.
Mr. Lynch.
Thank you. You know, Donald Trump is not the end-all, be-all. He has got some incredible policies. He's done wonderful things for this country. But what we are seeing right now really reminds me of Russia in the 1970s. We are seeing our government being weaponized in the political arena, which is what really nasty places do in this country, that we have actually sent our soldiers to fight to secure freedoms. And so we're seeing this happen in our own border. Is Donald Trump perfect? No. Are his policies great? They were fantastic, and I support them. But there's not anything at this stage that I believe, because of what's gone on in this process, that would dissuade me from voting for Donald Trump.
All right, Ms. Flora.
Yesterday, or this past week, was an incredibly troubling time in our history. I'm a constitutional conservative. Our document of checks and balances is one of the best things ever created in the history of mankind for governance. The fact that our judicial system, one of our three branches, has been weaponized and politicized should trouble every American, no matter who they vote for. And because of that, we have got to get back to a place where we can trust that in our judicial system there is equal justice under the law. So that is where we start. The second thing I would say about that, as far as what we see going forward, let's just look at the alternative. 3 years, we've seen the difference between the miracle of the Abraham Accords and the horror of October 7th. 0 people on the terror watch list apprehended in 2019, 169 last September. There is no other option of who to vote for president if we're going to begin to restore our republic. We cannot have 4 more years of Joe Biden. We will not survive, I do believe, if we keep going in this direction. And then we have to reform our judicial system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flora. Mr. Sonnenberg.
The answer is I don't see any reason that I would not vote for President Trump. I voted for him in 2016. I voted for him in 2020. I'll vote for him in 2024. He is our Republican candidate. Matter of fact, in 2016, there were many from Colorado that walked out of the National Assembly. I would not have done that either. I'm a Trump supporter, and I look forward to supporting him through thick and thin as our candidate for Republican president.
Thank you. Show of hands. Has anyone on the stage ever held a security clearance?
Top secret SCI, right here. Highest
right.
one you can get in the nation.
All
Thank you.
righty.
Thank you for that question.
Which brings up the next question, also a Trump-related question. And for this, you will have 30 seconds. Ken Buck has said that he couldn't vote for Trump if he's convicted in specifically the classified documents case. Do you agree with him? Why or why not? 30 seconds, Mr. Holtorf, to you.
All right, thank you. Ken Buck is a failed congressman. His analysis and his ability to represent this district is failed. Ken, it's not about you. It's not about your constitutional law degree from Yale. It's about the district and the people. Maybe you ought to listen to them and they wouldn't have ran you out with 20, 30, 40, 50,000 phone calls that you couldn't handle when you made all your mistakes. So let's start with what you're here to do. Represent real people in real places and not necessarily think for yourself or go write a book because you want to try to get money. And oh, by the way, when I talked to Ken about the book, you know what he said? Well, I didn't make that much money on that book anyway. So what does that tell you about Kenny Boy?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Holtorf. Sorry.
You're welcome.
Mr. Lynch.
I would like the record to reflect that I listened to how you want us to answer the questions. No.
No, Ms. Flora.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes.
That was very fun.
Ken Buck said he cannot vote for President Trump if he's convicted in specifically the classified documents case. Do you agree with him? 30 seconds.
It brings us back to the bigger issue. Right now, when we have Hillary Clinton, who had an entire server in her basement that has not been tried yet or brought forward. We have Joe Biden, who had documents classified all over the place at different locations, including next to his Corvette in his home with Hunter Biden there. There is such a lack of equal justice and treatment right now that I do not think that that is something I would use as a bellwether of who I would support. So I would continue to support President Trump.
Thank you. Mr. Sonnenberg.
Yes, I already said I voted for him in 16, voted for 20, I vote for him in 24. I don't care.
And Mr. Yu.
Well, obviously, this isn't a real charge if they're not charging Joe Biden for everything he did at the exact same point in time. So if it's not going to be equal justice for both people, then we can't take it serious. So absolutely, I would still vote for Donald Trump.
Thank you.
All right, we're moving on to our lightning round, and we'll start with you, Mr. Lynch. Keep the answers very yes or no, a name, or very quick. So we'll go Mr. Lynch, Flora, Sonnenberg, you. So first question, Mr. Lynch, starting with you. Who did you vote for in Colorado's presidential primary?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
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 Donald J. Trump.
All right. Starting now with Ms. Flora. Who should Trump pick for his vice presidential running mate?
It's a good question. I believe he's looking at Lee Stefanik, who did a phenomenal job at taking to task the heads of the Ivy League schools. I think she'd be a great choice.
Thank you.
Me.
Well, I was about to say Peter Yu, so you just stole my action there.
Mr. Holtorf.
All right, so let's get serious about this. How about Tim Scott, because he can bring in the African-American vote across the nation? Strategic thinking.
I see you shaking your head, Mr. Lynch.
Well, that'll teach me to write my answer down.
All right.
Tim Scott. Tim Scott.
Okay, we got the same thing.
All right.
I think you looked on my paper.
Mr. Sonnenberg, starting with you this time. If you're in the majority next year, who would you vote for Speaker? And let's assume that Mike Johnson is running for the position again.
Oh gosh, it's really it's hard to say because I don't know which leaders will be there, which ones won't be there. I actually support Johnson. I support Jordan. It depends on how that would plan out or play out. But here's what I'll tell you quickly. We would do it as Republicans in the majority behind closed doors and not let the Democrats tell us who our speaker's going to be.
All right. Mr. Yu?
So, this question, it drives me a little bit crazy. I'm just being honest with you. We don't know what's going on in D.C. We don't know exactly what goes on in those conversations. We don't know these people personally. All we know is what we see in the news. And for us to sit there and say who we're going to vote for, not vote for, it's ridiculous to be able to ask this question right now because we don't know what's going on. We would need to be there to be able to talk to them, give them an interview just like we're being interviewed right now. So for me to decide if it's going to be Mike Johnson or someone else, that's what we have to decide when we get there.
All right. Mr. Holtorf?
All right, I'm going to push back against Peter a little bit. We don't know who's going to get elected in November and be in the 119th Congress. That is true. But strategically, we know people that are there that have experience. And right now, Mike Johnson is building that experience and that resume. Is he doing a good job? In some areas, yes, he is. Has he been criticized for other things? Yes, he has. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a damn tough job. So we've got to wait when we assemble in January. We've got to see who's nominated. And I spent 5 years in the State House. We had 4 different minority leaders in 5 years. Now talk about turnover. Okay, so let's think about how...
All right, you're supposed to have a name, so let's just...
that was 30 seconds.
No, this
right.
was just a name.
Okay, well, to get to that question, right now we need to keep with who we have until we have someone that is more qualified.
Okay. Mr. Lynch?
Thank you. As one of 3 people up here that have actually, been in those sort of rooms and those sort of environments, there's a lot of nuance that goes into this answer, I will say for sure. And once again, we don't know the personalities of all of them. However, a quick name that I would throw out is Jim Jordan.
Okay. Ms. Flora?
It is a hypothetical because we never know who's going to be stepping up. I think Jim Jordan would be great. I think Mike Johnson is in a very, very tough position. But I would say the number one thing I would make sure we would do is do it together, unified as a coalition, and never once again leave our country without a Speaker of the House for 21 days. We've got to show that we can govern ourselves before we can show the country that we can govern the country.
All right. Starting with Mr. Yu, let's do just a yes or no on this. Mr. Yu, and then we'll go to Holtorf. Do you support the Colorado GOP's attempt to opt out of the state's open primary system?
Well, I apologize. You broke up. What was that again?
Sure. Do you support the GOP's attempt to opt out of the state's open primary system?
I do not.
Personally, I do.
Okay.
You can ask me a follow-on if you want professionally.
All right. Mr. Lynch?
Yeah, I've always been a guy that says pick a team, right? And I believe that. Now, here's the problem. That this has been opened up for so long now, we run the risk of isolating the largest voting bloc in this particular district, so no.
Okay. Ms. Flora?
The problem is that the people of Colorado voted on this, so it would need to be reversed in the same way. I understand why some people would like to do that, but here's what I've heard as I've been traveling around these 21 districts. There are so many people that have left our party because of the dysfunction. My focus instead is on persuading those people to join us once again and to rebuild our party. I think that's where our focus needs to be.
Okay, yes or no, though?
Not at this time. Maybe we'd have to overturn it the way that it was voted on.
Okay. Mr. Sonnenberg?
Republicans should pick Republican candidates. And if you want to pick a Republican candidate, join our party. So I don't support opting out of the primary, but I do believe we ought to make sure that Republicans are the only ones picking Republican candidates.
Okay. I'm going to hold you guys to the yes or no on this one. We're going to start with Mr. Holtorf and then move left, my left again. Mr. Holtorf, do you support ranked choice voting, yes or no?
Hell no.
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 Never.
No.
All right, well, we have some more questions. And again, yes, no answers on these. Would you seek to join the House Freedom Caucus? Beginning with Mr. Lynch. Yes or no?
I don't know, but I like basically their principles, but I need to get part of it, see what that caucus is about, right? I know all about caucuses.
So I don't know.
So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mrs. Flora?
I would be Freedom Caucus adjacent because I do not believe in joining a caucus where you have to vote with everyone else. I stood against when they voted against Israel aid twice since October 7th, but I do believe in their principles.
So you wouldn't join them, though?
No, but I would be working with them.
Okay. Mr. Sonnenberg?
I don't believe that you should use taxpayer dollars to pay for your dues to a caucus, and that's what they do, and so no, I would not join it.
Mr. Yu?
You know, with Congress having a 15% approval rating, for me to sit there and commit to anything in Congress right now without being there, without seeing what's going on, exactly see what the rules and what the expectations are, not joining anything yet.
Mr. Holtorf?
Well, I'm a big fan of Jim Jordan, and right now, knowing what I know today, I want to be a Freedom Caucus member. But I also would bring veteran leadership to change the way you do business if they need to change. And I am that change. I've done it in the State House, and I can bring change.
So that's a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Would you vote to extend the Trump tax cuts? Mrs. Flora?
Absolutely.
Mr. Sonnenberg?
Absolutely. No better way to stimulate the economy than allow someone to keep their own money in their own pocket.
Mr. Yu?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Holtorf?
I would promote legislation that makes the tax cuts permanent.
So that's a yes.
That's a yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Lynch?
Yes.
Okay. Should Justice Samuel Alito recuse himself from cases related to the January 6th riot at the Capitol? Mr. Sonnenberg?
No.
Mr. Yu?
No.
Mr. Holtorf?
No.
Mr. Lynch?
No.
Mrs. Flora?
No.
When you get up in the morning, be careful with this one. When you get up in the morning, what are the first two news outlets you check? Mr. Yu?
The first two every morning, the first one I look at is MSN. The second one I look at is Fox. I want to look at both sides and see how it's being covered and if there's facts or if it's actually opinion. You got to be able to see what's going on and make sure you know what's true and not just hearsay.
Mr. Holtorf?
Newsmax and Fox News are the first two outlets that I look at. And then the third one, surprisingly, is the Colorado Springs Gazette. So don't get mad at me, Chris.
Mr. Lynch?
Thank you. I actually have a brief sent to me by my staff because I'm still a legislator. So I look at that first, and then I follow up with local Fox News, Fox 31.
And Mrs. Flora?
I get notices from about 12 publications every morning and been doing that for years for the show. But the two I read first are the Epic Times for national news and the Gazette for state news.
Name two committees you'd like to serve on in the U.S. House. Mr. Holtorf?
Thank you, Chris, for the question. I'm ready day one to serve on the Armed Forces Committee. I'm also ready day one to serve on the Ag Committee. I'm already on G.T. Thompson's Advisory Committee in the U.S. House.
Mr. Lynch?
Armed Services and Energy.
Mrs. Flora?
Energy and oversight and accountability, particularly, we need to have accountability in our government, and I would love to work with James Comer on that.
Mr. Sonnenberg?
Largest two industries in the fourth are oil and gas and agriculture. I would like to serve on the Ag Committee as well as Energy and Commerce.
And Mr. Yu?
I'm representing Colorado, so energy and commerce and agriculture.
Do you support the federal government moving to reschedule marijuana? Mr. Lynch?
No.
Mrs. Flora?
No, and the reason why is we have to understand the level of THC right now in marijuana is exponentially higher than
So
it
that's
used
a
to
no.
be. That is an absolute no.
Thank you.
As a mom, an absolute no.
Thank you. Mr. Sonnenberg?
No.
No.
Mr. Yu? Mr. Holtorf?
No.
Okay. If Lauren Boebert is the primary winner, will you support her campaign in CD4? Mrs. Flora?
I have always supported the Republican nominee.
Thank you. Mr. Sonnenberg?
I have said publicly that I will support whoever wins this. If it's Lauren Boebert, I will do everything I can to get her elected.
Mr. Yu?
I would support.
Mr. Holtorf?
It would be a shame to elect her, but I would get behind the Republican candidate to unify our party. But it would be a shame for Eastern Colorado.
And Mr. Lynch?
Define support. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I would.
Thank you.
All right, the lightning round is over, and now we're back to longer format questions. With these, we will give you each a minute. Number one, to Mr. Sonnenberg. What do you think of the Colorado GOP's decision to endorse Lauren Boebert? 1 minute.
You know, and that's a challenging question, because what I would tell you is people drove hundreds of miles to go to the state convention. And those people voted to give our state GOP that authority. I disagree with it. I disagree. I think we ought to use
Leadership is to get Republicans elected. Picking and choosing winners is unacceptable. We all basically are putting ourselves out here to run for office, to represent you, and for someone to step in and sit there and say, we're just going to bypass all the laws, completely unacceptable to me.
All right. Mr. Holtorf.
Thank you very much for the question. If you go to holtorf4colorado.com, you will see 2 press releases that I released specifically addressing Dave Williams' leadership or lack thereof. And I'm going to talk today about Dave Williams' plan to gain endorsements for candidates before a primary with the COGOP, and the survey that he issued, and his slate of candidates that he's trying to promote. Like Peter said, the COGOP is to support all Republican candidates and not put your thumb on the scale. That's a problem for Colorado. Dave, let me tell you something. You got it wrong. I saw you in the State House. You got it wrong. We need to support all the candidates, okay? Everybody, lift all Republicans up, state GOP, boo all you want, but it's not their mission, and they need to get in line and do their job, Dave. Hear me loud and clear, Dave, now. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Lynch.
You get to repeat that question.
I would love to repeat that question. What do you think of the Colorado GOP's decision to endorse Lauren Boebert?
Yeah.
1 minute.
Well, I have a very long history with Dave Williams, and he has not stood behind many of the elected officials ever in his tenure. As the one active legislator that was subpoenaed by the state party because they're worried that I know how to conduct probably our state's most expensive primary and come out victorious, he just simply doesn't understand the function of a party, which is not to pick winners and losers, but to support all the candidates. Somewhere along the line, we have gone off our path of the role of the state party. It is causing us that actually are elected and doing this work a lot of heartache, and he really needs to figure out that he has been wrong in this, and it is a crying shame that we would ever have a party that would actually endorse primary candidates.
All right, Miss Flora.
Our great party has a long-standing and rich tradition of neutrality and supporting every single candidate. This is a drastic change, and I think it's very troubling. I think it's the reason why when I speak to people who have actually just left the party, some district captains, they're troubled deeply by this, particularly when there's a conflict of interest where you have someone helping make this decision who's also running for office and basically endorsed himself. It is a troubling situation that we're at. It signals to the voters in this great district that they're being dictated to. We have a bedrock of our election system to instead inform voters, let them make their decisions and instead of trying to tip the scales. It is deeply troubling. Even if I were not in this race, I would be deeply troubled by it. We've got to get back to the party doing its job. And by the way, focusing on growing the party itself. That's what I want to see. We have the right solutions. We have the right answers. Why are we down to 24%? It's because of this sort of activity going on right now.
While 2023 was an above average year for water, drought conditions still persist in areas of CD4. And development in Douglas County, which is a big part of this district, is hamstrung from a lack of water. Renewable Water Resources proposed a plan that would remove 22,000 acre-feet of water from the San Luis Valley and permanently dry up at least 10,000 acres of farmland to supply Douglas County with needed water. Your opponent, Lauren Boebert, opposed this plan and also claimed credit for helping to derail it. So this is a big question here. Would you have supported the plan, or would you support something similar in the future? Why or why not? And is it your role as a congressman or woman to be involved in this? Mr. Yu.
I do not support by any means. I do not believe in taking water from rural Colorado. I believe that Douglas County and our urban areas need to make sure that they do their own projects. I believe there's a project that's being put together right now, and to the level of success it'll be, the Platte Valley Water Project, which will basically build reserves and basically make sure that water is brought into Douglas County. That's what we should be doing. We should be looking at all alternatives to make sure that when you do have excess water, you're able to catch it, we're able to retain it, and make sure we do protect our rural areas, but also make sure that, you know what, we have an amazingly growing urban area. In fact, CD4, 3 of the fastest growing cities in Colorado. Number 1 is Windsor. Number 3 is Castle Rock. Number 5 is Parker. So this district is going to grow faster than any other district, and we're also going to have a population that's going to be changing. So we definitely need to make sure we have our own projects, such as something like that, building our own reserves for this area.
Mr. Holtorf, and again, 1 minute.
Okay, thank you for the question. I do have a follow-up on the last question if you want to circle back sometime. But let's talk about water. I oppose buy and dry policy. You see, even the nation of Italy last week made an announcement. They were going to protect ag land and the water associated with it on designated lands in their country, and that is a national policy now. They know that food security is national security. Okay, the San Luis Valley relies on that water for so many Hispanic farmers. Caballeros y damas, yo entiendo esta gente. Yo puedo hablar con ellos. Yo entiendo el Valle de San Luis. You see, I speak Spanish. I have Spanish heritage. I'm the only member of the Colorado Hispanic Republicans sitting before you right now. And I understand that those folks who have lived in Colorado more than anybody else, San Luis was the first town established in this state, need their water, and it should be protected, and they should not be taken by those municipalities who want to buy their water and redivert it to the Front Range.
Quick follow-up, should a congressman be involved?
I think nationally, if it's your district, now remember, that's CD3. So Lauren Boebert's probably the one to answer this because I think she's still the CD3 congresswoman if she wants to act like it.
But Douglas County's in CD4.
Okay, but it does affect indirectly. So nationally, yes, we need to protect agriculture. I want to be on the ag committee. We have to be the most productive ag country in the world. And if we take away our water, guess what, America? Guess what, Colorado? Guess what, CD4? You cannot be that country.
Thank you. Mr. Lynch.
I'll answer the last question first, which is absolutely this is the role of the congressman to be involved in water. Water is the lifeblood of CD4. As the only person on this stage that's currently on the Water Congress and serves on the Water and Ag Committee, I've studied this. I was just with Parker Water last week, and they were explaining their program that they're working towards to get water out of the South Platte. We don't want to cut off any possibilities of water getting to where it needs to get to for various reasons. Absolutely, ag must be number one in that priority. These projects that buy and dry are completely go against most of CD4 and our second largest economic sector in the state. So water is incredibly important to this job, and it is a federal issue. When we have water compacts with other states that, we were really close on that wet year. You mentioned 2023. We were really close to getting them to the bargaining table, and then we had a wet year, and that now we have to start that over. That is most certainly a federal issue.
Mrs. Flora.
Yeah, this is a very important issue because the Colorado population is expected to double by 2050. It's only going to get worse. And what I believe is that there is a role of the state government and a role of the federal government. Number one, I do not believe in buy and dry. I do not believe in this situation where we take from the rural communities for the ever-expanding Front Range population. So that needs to very much be looked into, that there is no buy and dry going on. Now, that is something that's going to be worked out at the state level, but the role of the federal government, we have got to, first of all, lower regulations so water storage can happen more frequently. We've got to start building that. We have to also, as a federal government, work on managing healthy forests. That is our watershed. That is a key to having clean, healthy water. Those have really been abandoned in many ways. So there is a role for the federal government, and I would make sure that we do that. But we have got to remember that one of the greatest industries in this state and one of the most important ones in our country and the world is our agricultural community. They need to be prioritized.
Mr. Sonnenberg.
I would never support them transferring water out of out of the Rio Grande or the San Luis Valley. Rio Grande already has compact issues. Should a legislator or should a congressman be involved in that? The only way the congressman should be involved in that is to help Colorado with the solutions. And I can tell you one of the solutions, the alternative is, we're allowing them over a million acre feet a year water leave over and above our compact on the South Platte. So let's build storage on the South Platte so that we can provide water both for our urban cousins and agriculture. The reason we don't do that is simply because we have an Army Corps of Engineers that hold up those projects. Federal government holding up those projects by permitting, because that changes every time we have an administration change. That's the role of the congressman right there, is to get government out of the road so Colorado can deal with its water issues the way they need to deal with them.
Thank you all.
All right, now comes everybody's most favorite part of a debate, and you know what's coming, right? Everybody gets to ask one other person a question. I know, everybody's really excited about this.
What if they're not here?
Oh, good question, Mr. Lynch. I'm not sure. What do we want to make a table?
I'll look in the book and see if I can find the answer.
Oh. Holtorf being Bobert in this and answering for her would be a viral moment, I'm sure.
It would be so much fun.
It would be. It would also live on the internet
Just to
forever.
be clear, please don't do that.
Yes, please do not do that. So please keep your questions brief, and candidates will have 90 seconds to answer. All right? We are starting with you, Mr. Holtorf. Select one person to ask a question, and please keep it brief.
Okay, I'm going to ask my question of Deborah Flora. Since 2022, since you ran for U.S. Senate, I've heard many of the same platform speeches and comments, and you talk about this thing called Parents United America, a nonprofit that you started. Now, I did a little research on Parents United America. I've got 4 years of records here. It looks like your revenues and expenses were under $30,000, $31,000 for every year, and probably averaged less than $10,000 of revenues and expenses for any year on the average. So what kind of an impact does a nonprofit have with such little revenue, such little expenditure for a nationwide nonprofit? And how does that correlate? You see, I run a company that's a multi-million-dollar company. My expenses on a monthly basis and revenue aggregated all this are 3 times larger than this. So explain how that would correlate and how running this nonprofit, as you spoke for the last 6 years on the campaign trail as one of your platforms and on your resume, explain what does that do and how does that correlate for somebody that wants to seek a congressional seat?
I really appreciate that question. Actually, it gives me an opportunity to talk about one of my greatest passions and one of the things I'm most proud of. I started Parents United America because when I realized that the comprehensive sex ed was shoved through in the last moment and hundreds of parents who showed up did not even have their voices heard. It was out of that, when there was no other movement happening, that I started Parents United America. I'm proud of the work that we did. We helped write and introduce curriculum transparency legislation so parents could see the very thing they had no say in what their children were being presented with. After that, I used that platform to travel all over this state, and the reason why there was not a lot of money there is because I didn't charge a dime. I gave my time tirelessly. We used that as a platform from which we made the documentary, Whose Children Are They? And I gotta tell you, if anybody wants to know if I've got the grit for this job, everybody said, don't take on the teachers' unions. We said it's the right thing to do. We then merged with another organization that is spearheading right now the effort to protect girls' sports, and I hope everybody signs that petition. You see, that is what I have been doing with my time, and I did not do it for money. I did it for children, for parents, to make sure that every child can flourish. You know, it's not summed up in dollars. It's summed up in the constant time for years I have put into this, and I will continue to do it. It's one of the reasons why I'm running, for the future of our children and our grandchildren, and to make sure that these decisions go back to the parents. I am very proud of that work, and I will continue to do it.
There you go.
All right. Mr. Lynch.
Thank you. Well, I was going to ask the not-to-be-named candidate, because she never answered from the first debate what the definition of a carpetbagger was. But since she's not here, I'll have, unfortunately, to pick on somebody else. So, Deborah, I would like to know, when we first started this race out, you were completely in favor of closing the caucus. You also said you were going to go to caucus. Both of those things, just a little while ago, you said you flip-flopped on that. I got to tell you, the one thing that I know about this business is that your word is your bond, whether it's good result or bad result. A simple question: what can you say that will let me know that I can trust you?
Thank you for that question, and I have spent a lot of time clarifying this. I'm happy to do it again, Mike. I didn't flip-flop. I'm a grassroots person. When I ran for the Senate, I went through the assembly system only, came 38 votes short of advancing, just simply because of errors that happened that day and delays. I do believe in that. I spent hours, 15,000 miles on my car, over hundreds of visits all over these 21 counties, listening to the constituents, to the citizens. As we got closer and closer to the assembly, there were many people that reached out to me, delegates and others, who were troubled by our GOP party right now, who is showing partiality, who has been behind so much of the drama that is going on. But I want to tell you something else about that as well. When we got petitions all over the state, thousands of registered Republicans, that was a grassroots effort. We had volunteers. I did it. Every single county. It gave me an opportunity to listen to those voters who are leaving our party right now. Many of them wanted to sign the petition. And the more that I heard, the more I realized that we need to fight to restore our very process. It's not a flip-flop. It would be like saying to someone in game time, oh, we're going to have a passing game. And then you begin to see what is coming along, and you make that adjustment. It was an adjustment I made after hearing many grassroots conservatives, many delegates who were concerned about the very process itself. There are many ways to get onto the ballot, and I am proud to be a grassroots person who spent my time listening, as I will as your next Congresswoman.
All right. Ms. Flora, back to you.
Yes. This one's for Richard Holtorf. At the end of the 9 News debate, in your closing remarks, when I would have no opportunity to actually respond, you derided the fact that I'm proud of my father, who served in the Air Force and is a Vietnam veteran, my husband, who's an 82nd Airborne veteran, and you said that anyone who is a, quote, Department of Defense dependent has never actually served. What I want to ask you is this. What would you say to every military wife in this room, every military family in this room, everyone who has served alongside their spouses across this entire district? I believe that they deserve an apology.
I think I'll answer that question right now. Thank you very much. First of all, Deborah, I didn't choose you at the State Assembly. I know you said you were going to go, but you weren't there. So I guess you called an audible right before that. So that's why my good friend Mike Lynch has said, how can I trust you? Because your word is your bond. But let's talk about service. I've watched you on the campaign trail from 2021. You're a DOD dependent. I understand that. You grew up the daughter as a DOD dependent of a Vietnam veteran. And I have the utmost respect for Vietnam veterans, all veterans. I'm the chairman of the, co-chairman of the Veterans Caucus in the U.S. House. Okay? I'm also a veteran, a combat veteran. And I understand service. But there is a distinct difference, Deborah, as you pound around the campaign trail when you say you're a DOD dependent and actually serving and deploying to combat. When your loved one, who is a service member, gets up at 5:30 in the morning to go do PT, goes on 2-3 week training exercises that are hazardous and dangerous, and then loads up their ruck and their kit, and they go for a 6, 9, 12-month deployment, there is a distinct difference. You need to understand that. You want to wear the label of being in the military, but you're not in the military. You're a dependent. And no, there's no rebuttal, I don't think. You ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer. Because if she gets to rebut, then we're going to start the ping pong match, if that's where we want to go. But there is a distinct difference, because a person that goes and deploys and come back in an aluminum box, and that dependent that is home worrying about them, who is not in harm's way. And I have lived that. I've seen it. I've been a casualty assistance officer for it, and I've had to bury comrades who laid the ultimate sacrifice.
All right.
There is a distinct difference, and I want you to understand it, ma'am, please.
Okay.
I'm
There
sorry,
you go.
I do need to respond to
Let's
that
be honest.
because
No, there's no
I-
rebuttal.
I-
There's no rules.
Richard,
We're not gonna
Richard?
allow the
Yeah,
quote,
the ping pong match. Let's not do that.
However, I would suggest after this that we all go have a conversation because we are all Republicans and ultimately we do need to, or I'm a Republican along with all of you, and we do need to work some of this out clearly.
I have a 2
I'll be more than
sentence-
happy to have that conversation with Deborah after this, and you can be the moderator,
Oh,
ma'am.
I definitely
How's that?
don't want to be the moderator.
I
okay.
have a 2-sentence response, however.
No, I don't want
because he's
her to have a
besmirched-
2-cent response.
Richard, you have
here we go.
besmirched the character
Negative.
of
I did
every
not besmirch
military
anybody's character.
spouse
I
saying
pointed out
I've
that you're
never
very
served.
dependent.
I'm sorry.
And there's
I'm
a
gonna
difference.
I'm gonna have to
Here we
step
go,
in here.
Colorado. Now, here we
Okay.
go. The ping pong match has started.
Okay.
You let it happen.
All right, everybody, we're on the same team theoretically. All right. Oh, and look at Jerry right here. He's got the dad face. I know where this is going. All right, Mr. Sonnenberg, to you.
Well, thank you. If you remember the first Women of Weld debate, I chose not to send a gotcha question to any of the other candidates because I want us all at the same team at the end and unify at the end. But there is a question. I was told that I could still ask a question, doesn't have to be a gotcha question. So this question's for Peter. I failed to ask you. How's your mama this morning? Is she having a good day?
Jerry, I'm your biggest fan, buddy. You're just a good man. And, you know, sadly, my mom is at an age where it's not going to get better. She has dementia. Doesn't even know who I am sometimes, and it's a little sad. So I appreciate you asking that. You know what? It's tough. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
That's it.
All right, Mr. Yu, to you.
So, as you guys said, just like the first debate, I hate this part. So I always ask just a fun question, but in this case, I actually have to ask the one because I was called out. Someone made a derogatory comment about me yesterday. Earlier this week, during a candidate forum, we were talking about climate, and I said, we are living in an ice age. That is a scientific fact. You want to Google it right now. Somebody sent out a letter yesterday, and I hate to do this, Mr. Lynch, but you called me absurd for believing that? I mean, first of all, what was the purpose of that? 2, I would hope that as a potential congressman, you would do some research before you callously make a comment like that. So the question I have, are you going to retract and make an apology and send out an apology to everyone that got that letter?
Well, sure. I'll apologize. I got to tell you, though, it sure doesn't feel like an ice age with what we've got going on around here. And scientifically, sure, it may be. Do we have serious drought issues in this state? Most certainly. So, but yes. So technically, if we are in an ice age, and I was just going to Google, then I will give you credit for that, for having the knowledge of knowing where we're at in our climate cycle.
All right, closing remarks. Mr. Yu, unfortunately, because we went over time, we only have 1 minute for closing remarks. So, time for your elevator speech.
Well, since we have such a short time, I'm not going to give you a speech. You know who I am. You know what I do. You know that I give you 100% every day. I go 150 miles an hour to make sure that I meet every single constituent, to make sure I know their name, that I shake their hand, that I find out what their concerns are, to make sure that, you know what, I'm assuring them that they can that I'm going to be there for you. You know what, I don't go around making campaign promises. I believe in personal representation. I don't run around chasing endorsements. I don't look for that perfect photo op or that talking point. I'm looking to make sure that I am not a politician, because that's what politicians do. I want to make sure that you have proper representation, which basically means each one of you is the priority, which means also that, you know what, it doesn't matter what your name is, who you are, or where you live. You are the priority. And so, since we are short on time now, I just want you guys to know I'm proud of my campaign. I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to spend, 8 hours a day knocking on doors and make sure I get to meet them first, make sure that we are all friends. So, appreciate your help. I appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Holtorf. Sonnenberg, sorry.
Oh,
My
we're going
apologies.
backwards?
Yes,
Oh.
we're going backwards. My apologies.
Huh.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
got it. Thanks.
I am Jerry Sonnenberg, and I am running for this seat. And I'm running for this seat because it's important that we have integrity and character, experience, and leadership. I have more leadership in the legislative field than the rest of the slate combined. I have proven track record of solving problems, getting things done, both in the majority and the minority. When I was President Pro Tem of the Colorado Senate, we did just that. I want to be your congressman. I won't embarrass you. I won't shout over other candidates. I won't shout over other people. If you're looking for someone that wants to be on TV, I'm not it. If you want somebody that's a workhorse and not a show horse, that's me. I'm proud of the work I did in the legislature. You'll be proud of me as your congressman. SonnenbergForCongress.com. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. Ms. Flora.
There's so much at stake in this election. Our country is dysfunctional. Our party is divided. It's time that we stand together to rebuild our party and to restore this republic. I'm a constitutional conservative and I'm a Reagan Republican. What does that mean? It means we have a big tent, and we can do that without compromising because our tent poles are in the Constitution. But we will lose this battle if we do not have someone that understands. We have to persuade our neighbors to join us. We have the solutions to securing our border, to cutting our crippling debt, to getting our economy back on track. That will be my focus. And you get to decide between more of the dysfunction or new principled leadership that will be focused on solutions, not self. And you see, the biggest question is, how do you know I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do? Because I know my plumb line of accountability. It is first to God who gives us our rights, to the Constitution that codifies them, and to you, the people for whom I will be working. I ask for your vote. It would be my greatest honor. God bless you.
Thank you. Mr. Lynch.
Thank you. And actually, Peter, I want to clarify. That was a restatement of what was in the Denver Post. Those were not my words. That was a restatement, and I was letting people know what's going on in the media. Colorado, you have a really important decision in front of you, and we get to do this not very often because these are safe seats. And it has been a number of years since we have actually had a legislator hold this position. I mean, this is Cory Gardner. We see what happens when folks that don't actually know how to do this job, those that are doing the job and currently can't pass bills, and those that have never even been elected. We have never sent somebody to Congress that's not been elected. That is part of the bad side of what Donald Trump has brought to this political scheme. Everybody thinks because Donald Trump got elected, well, I can go get elected. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to get serious about this and put people who are experienced. I have been at the highest level at the State House as the minority leader, led that group, brought civility, was the adult in the room. I have led troops. I am a West Point graduate. I know how to get things done, and I will continue to get them done for you. And Colorado, we've got to get behind one candidate, and I would appreciate that being me. Thank you.
Mr. Holtorf.
Well, thank you. And Mike, I can't agree with you on that last part. I'm sorry. We're good buddies and friends. But we are in a battle to preserve the republic. Do you know how close we are? Danger close. So what do you need as a congressman? You need veteran leadership. You need a retired colonel, a combat veteran, someone who's tempered in the battlefields of Afghanistan. Not somebody in soft shoes or who changes their mind when they make a commitment, okay, to do something. I'll tell you, I'm tough, I'm hard-hitting, I'm battle-tested. I'm a no-nonsense leader. I shoot straight, walk straight, talk straight. And what you see is the man I will be. I'll work hard to represent Colorado. Make CD4 proud, because I've got 5 kids and 2 grandkids. And in 20 years, will we have a republic? It's time to send a warrior to Congress, and I am that warrior. Holtorf4Colorado.com, Holtorf4Colorado.com.
All right, thank you so much. We will take a 10-minute break. Mandy, is that?
So the following candidates are running in the U.S. Congressional District vacancy election. It will be on your ballot. With the primary election, you will have the opportunity to vote for the person that is going to D.C. until the next Congress is seated. So they will be there through the end of December. And joining me now are Democrat Trisha Calvarese, Libertarian candidate Hannah Goodman, and American, what is Frank?
Approval Voting Party.
Approval Voting Party, Frank Atwood. And bless you, Frank, for putting up with my massacre. You may notice there is an empty chair on the stage. Greg Lopez accepted the invitation to come to the Rumble, and a couple of days ago decided not to come. In order to make sure people understand that, we're leaving an empty chair for Greg because he did accept and backed out at the last minute. So we're going to let the moderators, Kelly Maher, Jesse Mallory, and Ernest Luning take over right now. Jesse Paul.
He's a little taller
You
than
know,
I am.
I'm so sorry. And tell me I'm not the first person to do that to you, Jesse.
You are the first person to do that. It's okay, though. Yes. All right. And as was said, so actually...
Hey, guys, people in the back that are... People in the back that are still having conversations, if you could please move outside because it's incredibly disrespectful. The rumor is that that's Lopez supporters who are mad that he didn't show up, but we'd appreciate it if you could give these candidates your attention because one of them could very well be our representative. So if you could, let's pay attention to this last debate. Take it over. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Mandy. And just to be clear, Mr. Lopez actually backed out yesterday. So it wasn't a few days ago. He gave us 24 hours notice. And for the background of it, because we want to be fair, he said he was leaving because he wanted the endorsement of the Women of Weld. They felt it was inappropriate to do that before today's event, given that this is an event with a debate with folks from other parties. And again, so since Mr. Lopez committed to this debate a month ago and then let us know yesterday that he wasn't coming, we are going to have the empty chair up there, and we are going to ask a few questions that we had specifically for him, just because we think that the audience and those watching on the live stream deserve to know what those are. So just a quick heads up on what the ground rules here are going to be. We have the three candidates, 1 minute each for introductions, and then we will begin questions. Everyone's going to get 90 seconds to answer each question. If a candidate is referred to, if you refer to another candidate or invoke somebody else, they're going to have a 30-second chance to respond. There's going to be a lightning round, and as well as, I believe, a round where you're going to be able to ask each other questions. So this one will go about an hour as well, and I'll hand it off to Ernest for the first question. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to do intros. That's important. Ms. Goodman, you are going to go first. You have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I'm Hannah Goodman. I am a sixth-generation Coloradan. I'm the mother of seventh-generation Coloradans. My family has lived and resided on the eastern plains of Colorado since 1886. We are deeply proud Coloradans and deeply proud Americans. My husband is involved with my family's fourth-generation fuel hauling business. We are a single income family on a gas and oil income. I can imagine you all know how exactly rough that can be. I am so proud and honored to be here today to be able to project my ideas for what the Congressional District can be. I'm also a homeschooling mom, so I can definitely speak to the importance of education for our children. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks. Frank Atwood.
Good afternoon. Briefly, I'm here as a lobbyist for approval voting. Approval voting is an alternative voting method other than ranked choice voting. Approval voting can briefly be summed up as vote for one, vote for some, or vote for all but one. I'm using this opportunity to introduce you to an alternative voting method that is not ranked choice voting. Did anyone in the room besides me vote for Ross Perot? Thank you.
All right. This is Trisha Calvarese, the Democratic nominee.
First of all, I want to give a big shout out to the member of Gen Z that I brought with me to show him that you can walk into a room and have conversations with people who maybe don't agree with you, but you can still have a conversation. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Frank. Thank you to the women of the Republican Women of Weld for inviting me, and Grizzly Rose. I'm a daughter of CD4. Earliest days were in Sterling. Grew up in Douglas County. Went on an academic scholarship to Johns Hopkins and came back home because my parents got sick. They both had cancer, and I provided end-of-life care. And they did pass days apart last fall. And my dad, a lifelong Republican, before he passed, he told me to step up, run, and serve the community that raised you. So that's exactly what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thanks. And let me say, Mr. Atwood, I'm sorry. I think I cut you off. I didn't know you were finished.
That was the question. Did anyone here vote for Ross Perot besides myself? Thank you.
That's it?
Yes.
You just took 30 seconds, so kudos.
Wait one. We're all concerned with spoilers. We're all concerned with RFK this year. We've witnessed, some of us are old enough to have witnessed John Anderson, Nader, and here we are again. If we want to avoid the spoiler issue, then we need to go with an alternative voting method, and the best and simplest is approval voting. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Our first question, we'll start with Ms. Calvarese. Congress is going to pass a federal budget in the coming months. What needs to be in it, or how does it need to be shaped to get your vote? And more specifically, would you vote to shut down the government if you don't get what you want? You have 90 seconds, each of you, and then we'll go back around if we need to.
I absolutely would not shut down the government if I didn't get what I wanted. That's not my job. That's not what the job of this congressperson is. It is to pass a budget so that other people can do their jobs and can continue their livelihoods. I think that it is absolutely critical that we fund the CHIPS and Science Act to outcompete China. We've authorized some of the funding, but we need to authorize more, especially if we're going to get serious about outcompeting China in the industries of the future, especially in quantum and AI. So that's a critical piece. I would say we also need to have protections for waters and our farm bill. We got to get the farm bill passed. Is that, am I out of time? I got more time. Oh, great. Okay, fabulous. Excellent. And to make sure that we have funding for Ukraine as well. We need to support our democratic allies.
All right, thank you.
You're great, thank you. We'll stop there.
Okay, thanks. Frank?
Yeah, thank
Frank.
you.
Good afternoon again. My philosophical general beliefs are primarily with the libertarians. However, I'm here far more as a lobbyist trying not to antagonize any of you, but to introduce you to approval voting. Approval voting, once again, is vote for one, vote for some, vote for all but one. It's kind of a little strange, but I believe we're all old enough to remember a race in which there happened to be a Donald and a Hillary, and you might have been motivated to vote for one of them, but one of them you also found completely terrible that you'd rather not have voted for and wish you could vote for everyone else. Approval voting lets you do that. That's the third step. Vote for one, vote for some, vote for all but one. That one could have been, in this crowd, I suspect, more likely Hillary, but you never know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you answer the question? Would you vote to shut down the federal government if you didn't get what you wanted in the budget?
Sometimes principles trump the pragmatic. I suspect I might.
Okay, thank you. Hannah Goodman, please.
So for starters, radically, I'd preemptively shut down the federal government regardless of any budgetary concern because it is such a monolithic behemoth. The most important things we can do is to shave down the federal government's spending. No, I don't believe in giving it to any foreign wars, especially in developed nations. They can support themselves, not be supported by the American taxpayer. It's not fiscally responsible. I would shave down as much of that budget as could possibly be shaved down because it is so exorbitant and so overfunded, and bet no sitting congressperson has actually read through the entire spending bill because it's so large. Get rid of pork belly spending, get rid of all the spending, shave it down as far as can possibly be reduced, and that's my stance.
All right, thank you. All right, starting with the next question, we'll start with you, Mr. Atwood. I'm going to ask you to answer the question and not talk about approval voting this time, though. So you have run in the past for U.S. Senate, President, Vice President, and the 1st Congressional District as a Libertarian, all of those in recent years. So my question is, are you just running for any available office, or why do you want to represent the 4th District?
My wife has told me that if I win, she'll divorce me, so I have no intentions of winning. But I do have the intention of introducing the public to approval voting. Thank you. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, you did. Thank you. All right, Ms. Goodman, I'll go to you next. You've never held elected office before, and I wonder if you can talk about why you believe you're qualified to be a member of Congress.
It's absolutely true that I've never held publicly elected office, but I currently chair the largest third party in the state. I've been elected to represent 40,000 constituents in this state. I also manage and maintain a budget, and I've done so very well. These are just a few small reasons why I feel that I'm qualified for this position. I also understand that I am truly an advocate for the constituents who elected me. I will be their voice, and I will vote the way that they intend me to vote.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the timekeepers over here are going to hold up how much time you have left, so if you have any questions about that, they'll also start waving at you frantically if you go over the time. All right, the next question is for Mr. Lopez, who is not here. You said recently that people shouldn't be surprised to see you running for a different elected office in the future. So are you just running in this race to boost your profile? Okay. Ms. Calvarese, you're running on a very progressive agenda in the 4th District, pro-choice, pro-union, pro-Medicare, and you're also hedging your financial support for Israel. I wonder if you can answer whether that's really reflective of the 4th District, and you'll have 90 seconds for that.
I'm pro families. I am pro people who work for a living. And I'm coming from the AFL-CIO, that is the largest federation of unions representing working people in every single industry all across the country. I put that first. My dad, like I said, was a Republican. My mom loved Donald Trump. And it's those working class issues of being able to put food on the table, keep a roof over your head, and not worry about paying for your prescription drugs, right, just based on where you worked, of whether or not it's covered. That's what I'm running for. That's what I'm stepping up for. A perfect example, you know, my dad's union benefits enabled him to have access to a medication that extended his life years beyond the expectancy when he was diagnosed with kidney cancer. I got 4 more years of life with my father because he could afford a medication. And I don't think that any of you folks should have to give up that opportunity to have more time with your family because there's a drug that could save your life just because you don't have health insurance. So that's what I'm stepping up, and that's what I'm fighting for. You want to call that progress? Okay, call it whatever you want. I'm not a labels person. I'm not an actual politician. This is the first time I've done this as well. Right? And I'm doing this because this is the community that raised me, and I want to give back to it. I want to step up and serve.
Thank you. Okay. In the 4th Congressional District, 6% of households receive SNAP benefits, which have turned into a real sticking point on this year's Farm Bill. Since whoever occupies this seat will be voting on that legislation, what is your position on the level of SNAP funding that you consider to be necessary to win your approval, or maybe none at all? And also, if everybody goes to the bar and does a shot every time the word approval voting is said, this will be a lot funnier, I'm just saying. We'll start with you, Ms. Goodman.
As a libertarian, I believe in reducing all spending and all programs. For me, I'm going to vote against the SNAP program. With that will also come votes to reduce taxes. So when we reduce the tax burden on our people, it's interesting how much money they actually have left over to feed themselves. It's not the responsibility of the federal government to feed people. It is the responsibility of the federal government to protect their rights and their right to free trade as they see fit. We can make people far more prosperous by reducing taxes and all these social programs as well. I know, because I barely straddle the poverty line. I myself am not rich on that gas and oil family income, I promise, because it's a single income as well. And oftentimes, we're not necessarily able to make ends meet. I know exactly how that feels. But I do know that if I were able to keep more of my tax dollars in my pocket, I would absolutely be able to make ends meet, and I wouldn't have to go hungry and explain to my children why I can't go to the grocery store.
Thank you, Ms. Calvarese.
In one of the most productive districts in the country in terms of food, I think it is an absolute shame that we should let any child go hungry. And maybe that's just I was raised Catholic, maybe that's that part speaking, but I think what we need to do is fight harder for our farmers so that they can produce more food and lower the cost of food. I know for me, it's, my generation for millennials, they're saying groceries are a luxury. So we do have to drive down costs, absolutely, but we need to make sure that our producers are able to produce more and to profit more. That's gonna help lower costs, and building our local infrastructure so that we can get the food that our growers are growing, to our markets to drive down costs. But I don't think it's conscionable to let any kids go hungry in our state.
All right, Mr. Atwood.
Ms. Maher?
Yeah.
Approval voting replies no comment. Thank you.
All right. That's a shot, everybody.
All right, thanks. Now it's time for our lightning round. We're going to go left to right on this, starting with Ms. Calvarese. And please limit your answers to yes, no, or maybe someone's name, or no more than a sentence. We'll get through this quickly. Okay, who will you vote for in the November presidential election?
Biden.
Frank?
No comment.
Hannah?
I will be voting for Donald J. Trump.
Okay, thanks. Does Trump's felony conviction make you rethink your decision?
Absolutely not, because almost every sitting member of government currently probably has some kind of illicit thing going on.
Okay, thanks. We'll start next question. Ms. Calvarese, when you get up in the morning, what are the first two news outlets you check?
The Economist. And then I go to my stream. I see what's on Twitter. I see what people are talking about. But the Guardian, and I really like 9 News too. So, sorry.
All right, thanks. Frank?
I'm in a TV-free household, and usually it's Google News and Apple News.
Okay, thanks. Hannah?
In the infamous words of Gen Z, I watch the memes.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
All right. Starting again, should there be federal restrictions on abortion access?
Nope. I don't think any politician should be able to restrict access to what, yeah.
Okay, Frank.
Access, no. Funding, yes.
Okay, Hannah?
I believe that it's important that the states have rights over this issue because it decentralizes the federal government's power and puts it back in the hands of the people that they are supposed to represent.
Okay, thanks. And again, we'll start with Trish. Trisha, do you support the federal government moving to reschedule marijuana?
Yeah, absolutely. Legalize it.
Frank?
Yes.
Hannah?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thanks. Do you support the Biden impeachment inquiry? Would you have voted to impeach President Biden if you were in Congress?
No, do your job.
Frank?
Most likely not. No.
Okay. Hannah?
No, we have so much bigger issues, like our people are dying of hunger and lack of income due to crippling inflation.
Okay, thanks. And here's a chance to talk about how you might approach that. What are 2 committees you would ask to serve on if you were seated in Congress for the next 6 months?
Okay, the Chinese Communist Select Committee. Okay, I'm really excited about that one. And then House Science Committee.
Okay, Frank?
As a Purple Heart recipient, I'd ask to serve on the Armed Services Committee and Veterans Affairs Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah?
I would first and foremost ask to serve on the Ag Committee. Being born and bred in a farming family, I understand that industry very well. I'd also want to be appointed to the gas and oil, as my family is deeply involved with that industry. I understand exactly the different nuances of that particular industry.
All right, thank you. Should Justice Samuel Alito recuse himself from cases involving the January 6th riot at the Capitol?
Yes.
Frank?
No.
Hannah?
No.
All right. Let's see, do you support President Donald Trump's plan to repeal the Affordable Care Act?
Nope.
Trisha? Frank?
No comment.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. One last question. Have you ever been arrested?
No.
Frank?
No.
Sorry.
Hannah?
Yes.
Did you? Have you ever? Have you ever spent a night in jail?
Yes.
All right.
Alrighty. Do you support ongoing aid, financial and military, to Ukraine? How about ongoing aid to Israel? And would you include humanitarian aid to Palestinians as part of it? Each of you will get 90 seconds. We will start with you, Ms. Calvarese.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we need to support our democratic allies in Ukraine against the invasion of Russia. I think that our aid to Israel, we need to go ahead and apply the Leahy rule, make sure that there's conditions on it. And yes, we should absolutely have food aid for the folks in Palestine, yes.
All right, Mr. Atwood.
Yes to both.
Okay. Ms. Goodman.
Do I support funding for the Ukrainian war in Israel? No, these are highly developed nations. These are not third world nations. Not only that, there is so many wars going on worldwide. Why are we cherry picking wars? And why are we sending so much funding to completely developed nations? I think that humanitarian aid can be best served through charities. If you firmly believe that this is exactly where you want your dollars going, that is exactly where you should be able to spend them. I believe that we should repeal a lot of regulations surrounding humanitarian aid to be able to quickly and efficiently move those charity dollars to those regions should Americans actually want to fund them.
So, Ms. Goodman, a follow-up for you. Should aid go to any country? Should the U.S. provide any aid, military or otherwise, to any country?
No.
Ms. Calvarese, one follow-up for you. You've said, as you just did today, that the Leahy rule should apply, and that basically means that the U.S. should not provide aid to countries where there's credible information that they have committed a gross violation of human rights. Do you think that, given Israel's actions, it would be still eligible for aid under the Leahy rule?
I mean, possibly not. I'd have to, dig into it. I'd have to look at that. I don't, know the Leahy rule exactly. So, as it is applied, I'd have to look at it.
Okay.
All right, we have another specific question for each of you, and we prepared one for Mr. Lopez, so we'd like to read that. Mr. Lopez, you pleaded guilty in the early 1990s to harassment in a domestic violence case involving your wife. In 2020, he settled a lawsuit filed by federal prosecutors alleging that after he left the Small Business Administration, he violated federal law by attempting to improperly influence actions of the agencies. Why should voters trust you? Don't have an answer. Okay, well, Ms. Calvarese, the energy industry is important to the 4th Congressional District. Would you support a ban on new oil and gas drilling on federal land?
I'm coming from the labor movement, and I used to work for a coal miner, and I am endorsed by the United Mine Workers of America. There is a big difference between a coal company and a coal community. So I want to make sure that folks are taken care of in the transition to renewable energy. It's not going to be on our backs, and it's not going to be at the cost of the middle class. I don't think we need any new oil and gas wells, but we need to make sure that we're taking care of the legacy fossil fuel communities as we transition.
Okay, Mr. Atwood, you're known for advocacy of the approval voting method. What's your second most important policy point?
None.
All right. Now, folks know. Well, Ms. Goodman, libertarians are largely viewed as spoilers for Republican candidates instead of actually trying to win office for themselves. The agreement that you signed with Dave Williams to put together something allowing libertarians to step aside seems to back this up. What's your strategy to actually win this seat for libertarians?
As I'm a sixth-generation family from this exact district, I feel that it gives me leverage over the other candidates running. I have a huge audience within the northeastern corner of Colorado, and I realize that's not super population dense. But guess what? The whole eastern corridor is nothing but generational families for the most part. Word travels fast out on the eastern plains. So my strategy is word of mouth and going to these towns where I have contacts and relations and speaking to our farmers, to our ranchers, to our gas and oil families, and letting them know that I'm here and I will represent them in our government. They are the forgotten man and woman economically in our country. And it's time that they actually had a voice and actual representation in government. How long has it been since a Coloradan, a true-blooded Coloradan, has represented Colorado in the federal government?
All right. Next question, and we will give you each 90 seconds. If elected to serve out the remainder of Ken Buck's term, what impact do you realistically expect to have during 6 short months in Congress? We will start with you, Mr. Atwood.
I suspect for each of us it will be very little, but it's an opportunity to advance issues that are significant to us, such as approval voting. Thank you.
Fabulous. All right, Ms. Goodman.
I think that for me, the most important thing that I can do politically is to advance liberty. I don't care when, how, who, or why. I'm here to advance liberty. In the 6 short months I would be serving in a congressional term, I could make inroads and try and whip votes that would align with liberty. I'm a very small woman, but I have a very powerful voice, and I'm very infectious with my ideas. So it would be nice to be able to whip the Republicans that have these seats into actually upholding the principles of liberty, which they say they represent, but often fail to do.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Calvarese.
Well, that's why I'm not just running for the 6-month spot. I'm running for the seat to serve it for the long haul. But one thing that we can get started on right away is I would love to write some letters to the Department of Commerce and ask them why they're not adhering to the project labor agreements and to prevailing wages as the various laws, both CHIPS and Science Act, Bipartisan Infrastructure, and Inflation Reduction Act. As those laws are written, they are supposed to absolutely bring in the labor movement. So I am endorsed by the Colorado AFL-CIO, by the way, for both this race and the primary. And those are some of the issues I'm hearing from folks. So that's something we can move the needle on right now.
Thank you. You guys are blasting through our questions, so I'm going to tack one on here. And I'm not going to ask Mr. Atwood this one because it'll become obvious in a second. But Ms. Calvarese, I'll give you 90 seconds here. This is a Republican district. We're at the Republican Rumble. How do you plan on winning Republican votes?
I'd say it's unaffiliated, right? There's lots of unaffiliated voters. So my mama loved Trump, okay? And I got to say, I miss arguing with her all the time. I sincerely do. Because when you have people who have different beliefs, where you find common ground, it's rock solid. It is rock solid. So, after caring for my parents, right, that transcends all parties. That the things we worry about, the things that keep us human, we need to lean into those. It's about our communities. It's about our families and making sure we can take care of them, keep food on the table. So meeting people where they are, understanding their issues, and showing up to any place I'm invited, right? I will go anywhere. I will meet people wherever they are. I will hear your issues. I understand. This is a job that's got to represent all of us, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Mr. Atwood, I would ask you the question, but For the sake of your marriage, I'm not going to. So, Ms. Goodman, how do you plan on winning this district? Obviously, Libertarians and Republicans are more aligned than Democrats and Republicans are, but how do you win in a Republican district?
By simply going out and advertising my ideas as they stand. You're absolutely right. There's not much difference between the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party, but there are differences. The fact of the matter is, Libertarians mean exactly what they say, and they stand very hard on their principles. There is a reason that I'm not a Republican, and there is a very good reason why I'm a Libertarian. I mean exactly every single word that I say, and if elected, I will do exactly the things I say I will do. You cannot buy me, you cannot pay me off, and no matter what you try to do, I will always come back stronger and harder. Republicans love that. They actually want that in government. Your everyday moms and dads and grandpas and grandmas, not the people elected to office. They want these people elected to office because they think they champion the ideals that they hold. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they waver, sometimes they waffle. Why didn't the Republican-controlled government under Donald Trump repeal Obamacare when they had both chambers?
Go for it, Mr. Atwood.
I'd like to point out to the public here that the unaffiliated percentage of registered voters here in Colorado is 47% approximately. The Colorado Democrats are a whopping 26%, and the Colorado Republicans are far behind them at 23%. So you're within 3% of each other, but you're still both minority compared to a majority unaffiliated. Thank you.
It's very good. Now, we're at the time where each candidate can ask another candidate a question. Please keep the questions brief. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer. Ms. Goodman, can you start? Do you have a question for one of your opponents here?
Yes. Frank Atwood, can you tell us more about approval voting?
Let's keep it to 90 seconds.
Ms. Goodman, aren't you generous to me? Thank you. Yes, approval voting, we're seeing too many spoilers, and coming back to the percentages here, too often we vote for the lesser of two evils, we take a very long shower afterwards. What I'm offering to you is the opportunity to not only vote for that lesser of two evils as a backup plan, but to also vote for who you really like. If you're so inclined, write in yourself. But it's an opportunity for you to express yourself and have a chance of being heard. Approval voting, unlike our current system and other alternatives that seem to be more popular, moves us beyond two-party thinking. It lets you move out of the blocks and realize that there are other choices. If you're being controlled, you're given two choices. If you really want to be heard, you want more choices so that there's variety of opinion being expressed. Thank you, Ms. Goodman, for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, Frank. Do you have a question for either of your opponents?
Yes. My question for Ms. Caricia is, if you were in office, would you vote for approval voting legislation?
I'll look into it now that I know it exists. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Calvarese, do you have a question for either of your opponents?
Well, I do for Greg. Greg, if you're running as Lauren Boebert's seat warmer here, buddy, it's kind of hard to do that if you're leaving an empty seat, don't you think?
All right, to build off of that, we have this question since you kind of opened the door for it. And we'll start with Ms. Calvarese. We'll give you a minute for this, but can you just talk about what your reaction is to Mr. Lopez not showing up today?
I'm sorry I went so hard on you on the last two debates. I thought I was being pretty nice. So we've debated twice already. I went on the Dan Caplis show, y'all. Okay? And I debated him there. I debated him at Windcrest. That's an elder facility, 2,000 folks, closed TV. And I was sincerely looking forward to him being here today. I think it is so important to show the rising generation that we don't duck conversations with people we don't agree with. You know, if you're running for office, you gotta represent your values and what you're running for. So,
Mr. Atwood?
Of course. Mr. Lopez, might you vote for approval voting? Thank you.
Anybody who's playing the approval voting drinking game, I hope you have an Uber home. Ms. Goodman.
I think that it speaks volumes. Silence speaks louder than words oftentimes. And I disapprove of taking your ball and going home when things seem like they're not going your way. And I think it's actually quite terrible as an example for the youth. I have 2 of my 4 children here today, and they're seeing somebody here who promised to come and who has failed to show up and said, I'm not getting my way, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. What an example for the youth today. And I guess that's also why I'm in politics. I was challenged by my grandpa, and so here I sit. And, you know, they always say the kids never want to step up and do anything, but at the same time, what are the old guard doing? Taking their ball and going home. What a travesty.
All right. Well, we are at the time for closing remarks now, and so since Ms. Goodman opted to go last, we'll start left to right, or my left to right. So, Ms. Calvarese, you can go first. 2 minutes each. You're up.
I'm a daughter of this district, and I'm just honored to be. I am so honored to be here. I think this is, you know, this was my dad's like dying wish that I would step up and be here, and so I'm honoring him by doing that. And just the fact that you all have invited me here, you've been so respectful, you've asked great questions. This is what it's about. This is what a democracy is about. And you have to exercise your freedoms to keep them, right? You got to speak up. We have to participate, and that's exactly what this is. So just sincere gratitude. Thank you so much again to the women of Weld County, the Republican Women of Weld. I also want to thank the Grizzly Rose staff. Thank you all for hosting us here today. And of course, to you all, thank you for your great questions.
I'd like to second Ms. Caldeira's,
One thing, okay, because some folks ask, how do you say my name? You can say it Calvarese, 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 however you want, but if you're going to say it right, you have to say it with your hands. So that's Calvarese. There you go.
Thank you. There will always be dominant parties. Approval voting lets us see the candidate's true level of support, even if you're part of a minor party. Approval voting moves us beyond two-party thinking. I can't promise victory. What I can promise is with approval voting is viability and visibility for all parties, and the party's true level of support will be documented. What do voters want? They want to be heard. In the current system, too many are not being heard, and they're becoming unaffiliated and too often disinterested. What I ask is, I don't want your vote, I want something more. I ask you to investigate and contribute dollars to approval voting efforts. I'd like you to also view Center for Election Science as a form, and in summary, with regards to approval voting, vote for one, vote for some, vote for all but one. Approval voting moves us beyond two-party thinking, and currently we see too much of the duopoly. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Goodman, you'll have 2 minutes.
The reason that I am running for office, the reason I'm involved in politics at all, is because I don't necessarily want liberty in my lifetime. I want liberty in the lifetimes of my children. My husband is terminally ill. He couldn't be here today. He can barely take care of the two children that I left home. I'm walking into the future full of unknowns and uncertainties. No one's coming to save me, and no one's coming to save my children. The reason I'm standing on this stage and fighting for the voice of liberty is because no one else is going to do it for me. If I want a liberty future for my children, a world set free in their lifetimes, I have to put in the work now. It's incredibly hard to leave my home, to leave my husband who I have to take care of, who, regardless of the way he feels, goes to work and works every single day, 6 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day to support us. When he's gone, I will have nothing. The only thing that I hold on to is the hope that the work I'm doing now is going to make a difference for my children. So if you want to make a difference for your children and their children, put me into this seat. Vote for me in November, and we will advance liberty, and we will see a world set free in our children's lifetime, and we will put an end to all this nonsense. If you're interested in more of what I can offer you, please go to hannahforliberty.com and check out my platform, make a donation. Anything is helpful. Thank you to the Women of Weld for including me on this debate stage. Thank you for Mr. Luning for inviting me to this debate. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much for everyone who took time out of their day to come listen to some opposing ideas to their probably normal ideas within the rest of the debates. I value this time up here, and I look forward to your vote in both the special election and November.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate the candidates. Please give a round of applause for the candidates who showed up today. We appreciate it for all three panels. And Mandy's going to tell us that the straw poll is going to be conducted by approval voting.
You know what? That's a great idea. Frank could probably give us more information about that. I hear he's up to speed. I want to say a big thank you to all of the moderators. They did such a great job coming up with questions, being very specific. I want to thank these three candidates for once again respecting your time and coming out here to make their case for your vote. There is the bucket for the straw poll not being done by approval voting. Right, sorry, Frank, you didn't get it in time. Right at the back, as you come out, you can go ahead and drop that in there. Don't forget to pay your tabs if you have anything open, and I hope you took great care of those bartenders behind the bar. And thank you so much to all of our sponsors, to the amazing group of women that have put this all together. Big round of applause for all of those people, please. And I think we're done.